That's my childhood house. I wasn't turning down the street that I grew up in. I wasn't standing near the large oak in the front yard of the house where I had lost all my baby teeth. I wasn't sitting inside the kitchen, where on my 15th birthday, I accidentally dropped the cake that my mom had baked, which made my family laugh so hard that we shed tears. No. I was holding an oil painting at a Goodwill on the other side of the country. That can't be possible, my husband said. It can be possible, Parker, because I'm holding the flipping painting and telling you that this was my house. Exactly. 1, language, he joked. 2, can I say something without you jumping down my throat? Parker asked, his voice even. Fine, I said. Is there an outside chance that this just looks like your childhood home? I mean, you grew up in the suburbs. A lot of those houses were pretty cookie cutter, no? I hated to admit that he had a point, but as I stared at the house, I couldn't come around to that line of thinking. This was my house. The oak tree looked the same. Hell, the roses in the flower beds were the same size and color as I remembered them. I shook my head. No, I mean, I hear you and you're not off base, but dude, this is my house. I pointed at the porch. I broke that railing trying to do a ballet spin and I fell into the bushes. You? Missed 2 left feet. Senorita trips a lot. You tried to do a ballet spin. To be fair, I did the spin. I just didn't stick the landing. A minor detail in the world of dance. The landing part. I landed on the bushes right here, I said, pointing to the painting. Hold on, I have to send a photo to my mom. Does she have any old house photos? Of course she does. You've met her, right? I had Parker hold the painting and snapped a few pictures. I sent them over to Mom and asked if she had a photo to compare it to. The message came back a minute later. Oh my God, that is our house. Weird. Here's a photo I have saved on my phone. Another ding brought us the photo that she mentioned. It looked exactly like the artwork in my hand. I showed Parker and he nodded. Jesus Christ, he said. And that is it. I told you. That's wild. Is it a print or a real painting? I ran my hand across the art. There was a palpable texture to the brushstrokes. Sometimes a print may have varnish applied to give the impression of brushstrokes, but this wasn't that. I think this is real, but let me check something else, I said, walking toward the wall of ugly lamps. I plugged in a lamp and held the painting in front of the bulb. Some artists will draw the picture first with a pencil before painting. Sometimes you can see those strokes when you hold it up to the light. Staring at the oak tree in the painting, I saw the telltale graphite marks. It's real, I declared. My minor in art history is still paying dividends. Who painted it? A slash of red paint in the corner mimicked a signature, but Parker and I stared at it as if it were written in Minoan Linear A. Parker traced the paint with his finger, forwards and backwards. The first name may be George or Jeff. I think George. Look at how it flows. He retraced the letters and it made sense to me. Okay, what's the last name? Hell if I know. I tried Parker's finger tracing. It didn't work for me. It felt like I was tracing a line drawn by someone with too much caffeine in their system. These didn't seem like actual letters. It might be Moffat, a soft voice said from behind us. We turned and saw that a Goodwill employee had appeared. She was a short, frail-looking, elderly woman with a hairstyle that resembled a well-constructed cumulus cloud in both color and shape. Moffat, I said. I think that's an M. she said, pointing to 2 humps. And then it kind of circles into an O, and the double F's. The I and the T are somewhat stylized, I think. Oh, artists being artists. I looked at it and yeah, it kind of looked like Moffat. I can see it now. George Moffat, you think? Oh, I do. Beautiful piece though, don't you think? Yes, I said. It looks exactly like the house that I grew up in. I showed her the photo that my mom sent. Oh, how strange. Right? I grew up across the country. Why is this even here? You know, when I was younger, there was a company that would paint your home for you. House painters? Parker deadpanned. Ignore him, I said. He doesn't know how to act in public. She laughed. Oh, I understand. I have one just like him at home. That's why he's at home. I laughed. You are teaching and I'm taking notes, ma'am. Anyway, they would come paint portraits of your house. It was a thing for a few years. And this looks like one of those. There may be a company name on the back under the frame. I flipped the painting over and gingerly removed the frame. Sure enough, there was a small, faded sticker that read, Cozy Home Portraits Company. There wasn't any other information. I made an impressed noise. Would you look at that? Now I have a jumping off point to find out what this is all about. Thank you so much. Marge, thank you. Sorry again for this guy. Oh, Marge, please forgive me. You're a gentle woman and a scholar. Marge leaned into him and nodded at me. Oh, you're punching above your weight with her, kiddo. Keep her happy. Parker laughed, wrapped his arm around my hip, and pulled me in for a hug. Marge, that's the best advice I've ever received from a Goodwill employee. If only your barber had given you good advice, you could have avoided that haircut. I burst out laughing and Parker did too. Oh, Marge, I hope to grow up just like you. Aim higher, dear. But you find a guy who can take a joke. That's a win. You guys want to get that or you're still debating? I looked at Parker and he nodded. How can we not get this, even if it's just for the story? Marge smiled. See, you can learn. Come on, kids, I'll ring you up. When I got home, I immediately began researching the Cozy Home Portraits Company. I had a hard time finding anything. Most of the search results were links to people on Reddit asking the same questions. Apparently, there were a lot of folks like me who were surprised to find their childhood homes immortalized on canvas. One commenter said something that stuck with me. Hey Parker, listen to this, I said, reading the post. My mom says she remembers someone approaching her and asking if they could take a photo so that they could paint the house later. She had told them no at first, but they said that they would do it for no cost. Mom agreed and assumed she would get the painting at some point, but she never heard from the company again. What's the next commenter say? Oh, this sounds fake, I read. Kind of a dickish response, no? It's Reddit, he said, shrugging. Maybe they just used the house for inspiration and sold the paintings to commercial houses for reproductions. Well, then why bother involving the homeowners at all? Maybe to assuage their worries of somebody standing outside their home and snapping photos of their house, Parker suggested. I mean, anybody could take a photo of our house and I would have no idea unless I saw them do it. True. It's weird, I'll grant you that. But I think I'm on the right track. Commercial art, Americana stuff. And that was to be it. He may have been onto something, but that answer didn't feel right. I couldn't work out the logic. If this company had been around for a while and painted portraits of homes all across the country for commercial sale, why wasn't there any record of them? No stories online, no official business records, no known CEO or lists of artists or anyone. Hell, even searching for the name George Moffat didn't yield results. My mind told me that there was something off about this. A sense of dread loomed over the whole thing. I let it marinate all day to see if I'd reconsider. Shocking to no one, I didn't. I told Parker as much as we got ready for bed. "You're reacting that way because of what's happening in the world right now," Parker said, yawning. "There are real evil people out there, but they aren't painting pictures." "Hitler painted pictures," I said. He gave me a deadpan stare. "You know what I mean. I just can't let it go, you know. It's odd. Odd that it was done at all. Odd that it traveled all the way out here. Odd that I found it. Odd stacked on odd stacked on odd. Turtles all the way down." "What?" I said, crinkling up my face. "What do turtles have to do with anything?" He laughed. "Oh, nothing, just a dumb expression." He yawned again. "Why is this bothering you so much? Some random company painted and sold pictures of my childhood house with nobody knowing about it. It's odd," he said with a smile. "Yeah, very. It's just not sitting right with me." Parker yawned for a third time. My melatonin is kicking in here. Get some rest and see how you feel in the morning. If you still feel off, maybe call your mom and see if she has a story to tell. She might know something." He didn't wait for my response. Instead, he rolled over, shut off the lamp, and turned down our sound machine. As digital thunderstorms rolled into our bedroom, I lay down on my pillows but didn't fall asleep. This whole thing smothered my thoughts as much as my weighted blanket did my body. I would call Mom tomorrow, see what she knew. If anything. I heard light snores coming from Parker's direction and I sighed. That man could fall asleep even if the house were on fire. I flipped on YouTube, found something to help me sleep, and I closed my eyes. Or I would have, if I hadn't seen our front porch light turn on. A cold touched my brain and froze the rest of my body. The light going off didn't mean a prowler was trying to jimmy open our lock. It could be a bug flying too close to the sensor, or a sleepwalking squirrel. Improbable, sure, but they were better than the alternative. I looked over at Parker. I didn't want to wake him, but I also wasn't keen on investigating alone. While I was going over the pros and cons of getting out of bed, I heard a noise in the kitchen. That made the decision easy. I elbowed Parker and he rejoined the waking world. "What?" he asked, his voice a blend of exhaustion and annoyance. "Our front porch light went off," I whispered. Raccoons or possums tripping the light," he said. "It's not worth waking me." "I know, but I heard somebody in the kitchen." His eyes zinged open. In a flash, he was on his feet and grabbed the bat that we kept near the bed. He quietly inched along the wall until he got to the bedroom doorway. He peeked out and scanned the room before turning back to me and shrugging. I pointed to the kitchen again before popping up and joining him on the wall. Parker wasn't pleased. He told me, not in words but vigorous nods, to go back to bed and wait. I didn't. He gave in and we made our way out of the bedroom, me walking directly behind him like some backwards waltz. I saw nothing. That went double after Parker slammed his hand on the switch, flooding the room with light and damn near blinding me in the process. I let out a painful yelp and I covered my eyes to adjust. I heard Parker sigh. "We're good. Nothing in here." "Oh, you gotta tell me before you do that," I said, finally checking out the room. Everything initially looked washed out. "I'm nearly blind." "I wanted the element of surprise," Parker said. "Well, you achieved it. All I see now are a bunch of little diamonds everywhere." He walked into the kitchen. "Your intruder is nothing more than a fallen salt shaker," he said, holding up the culprit. "Oh." And like I said, The porch light was probably from a raccoon or something. I'm going back to bed. You should too. He walked past me, patted my butt as he did, and headed back to bed. I was about to join him when my eyes had landed on the painting. I walked over to it and stared. In the store, looking at it had flooded my emotions with joy and happiness. But now, there was none of that. Unease seeped into my blood and rushed through my body. Something was different about the painting. I couldn't put my finger on what had changed, but I knew that something had. It was giving me chills. I grabbed a nearby cloth napkin and draped it over the artwork, like a coroner covering a dead body. My thinking was that if there was something supernatural about this thing, the napkin would keep it at bay. It's dumb, I know, but it made sense at the time. I couldn't believe it when you sent me that picture. That is so wild. Mom was too chipper for this early in the morning. She always was, though. A real rise with the early bird kind of gal. And that wasn't me. I still had bedhead as I sipped my cup of coffee. Parker, another early riser, cooked breakfast. Yeah, I thought so too. Somebody told me a company used to go around and paint pictures of homes. They would ask the homeowners beforehand. Any memory of that? Oh, not that I can remember, but back then it was mostly your father who spoke with the salesmen. I found them unseemly. I can't imagine he would allow somebody to do that. Rest his soul. Yeah, I agree, Dad was pretty private. We had a neighbor who was a painter, though. Carl. No, that wasn't it. Craig. Oh, gosh dang my ancient brain. Bonnie, don't get old, it's hell. I'm trying not to. It's why I do my nightly skincare routine. Yeah, it's intense. Parker added with a smirk. Oh, what was his name? Oh, it's been years since I thought of him. Craig Morris, something like that. He didn't live near us for long. Oh, Dad didn't like him. At all. Why? Oh, Craig was one of those people who were just constantly irritating. The human equivalent of a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth. He rubbed your father the wrong way. I don't remember Dad talking about him. Oh, he didn't around you, but with me, oh boy. Craig used to walk by the house all the time, always whistling Pop Goes the Weasel for some reason. He would stand too close when he talked to you. He would leer at me when I was outside hanging laundry on the line. He would never get the hint that I wanted to be left alone, even though I was always short with him. Especially after he said that you were growing up nicely. Gross, I said. I was 10. Yeah, like I said, he was a weirdo. But again, most of those artist types are, I suppose. You remember your Uncle Walter? He made those ghastly papier-mâché skulls. They used to be all over his house. It was like walking into some cannibal's hut whenever we would go over there. But he was good at making them. Who would want them is another thing altogether. He gave us one and I made your dad keep it in a bag in the garage. Oh, don't bring that ghoulish shit in my house. As my mom rambled about skull shapes like a Victorian phrenologist, a thought came to me. I looked down at the painting and traced the painter's name. Mom, could his name have been Craig Moffat? Parker looked over at me. I nodded down at the painting and traced what I thought the letters were with my finger. He hit his forehead with the spatula and shook his head. Oh my God, yes, that was it. Craig Moffat. God, what a blast from the past. He really was a weird little freak of a man, my mom said, laughing. He used to wear these tiny little shorts and he did not have the legs for them. Looked like 2 toothpicks stuck in an orange. Mom droned on a little longer, but provided nothing of substance beyond Craig Moffat's horrid legs. But she had given me some new information, the artist's real name. As soon as I hung up, I grabbed my laptop. Craig Moffat, not George, Craig. Yeah, I see it now, Parker said. And we should have never trusted Marge. I didn't like the cut of her jib. Oh babe, her jib was flawless, I said, turning to the painting. Her eyes, and not so much. Hey, to be fair, we all agreed it was George Moffat. There he is, Craig Moffat. I turned the computer around and showed a web page dedicated to his art. Parker leaned down to get a closer look. His legs do look like toothpicks stuck in an orange. Rolling my eyes, I turned the laptop back to me and clicked on the man's About Me page. It was illuminating. Craig had quite the little career. He had worked for a few newspaper outlets, a few magazines, some ad campaigns. His stuff was good. There was a list of known works. There are a few house paintings listed here. It has to be him. Has anybody mentioned how odd this is? Parker said with a sly smile. It's catching on. Maybe you saw your home as a happy family home and wanted to capture it for that company. Is there a contact page? Oh, there is, I yelped. I read the page out loud. If you have any questions about Craig or his work, please feel free to reach out here, I said. Oh, that's great. You can email him and ask directly. Moffat Estate at moffatart.com, I read. Oh shit, he's dead. Oh, that shouldn't matter. Maybe the guy who runs the estate can answer your questions. I nodded. It was worth a shot. I started composing a message and Parker went back to breakfast. I glanced at the artwork on the table next to me. Something about it picked at my brain. Hey, I meant to ask, have you been watching professional wiffle ball games on our YouTube? Oh, yeah, I've started turning on games after your melatonin kicks in. Puts me right out. Uh-huh. Are you a wiffle ball fan? Oh no, don't be silly, I said, laughing. I just happened to cross it one night and fell asleep like 10 minutes into a game. It's better than ocean waves. Which game was it? Rhinos against the Storks. Oh man, those two teams hate each other. The Storks have won the last 3 series behind Dustin Braddock's nasty banana ball. I stopped speaking because I could feel Parker's smug smirk on his face. I looked up and caught it with my own eyes. Not a fan, huh? What the hell is a banana ball? Hey, look, they emailed me back already, I said. What the hell? Maybe there isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate. Hi, Craig Moffat was my father. He did several pieces of local homes during that era. I would love to discuss this with you. Can we set up a call? Yeah, so there clearly isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate, Parker said. I'm gonna say yes. I think I have to. If for no other reason than my own sanity. Yeah, go for it. I can be there for the call if you need me. So I set up a call with the estate for later that day. Hopefully there would be some information that I could use to stop the itch in my brain. Parker served me breakfast before he got ready to head out to the gym. You never told me what a banana ball is, he said, placing the plate in front of me. Oh, it's a sidearm slurve, a strikeout pitch, nearly unhittable if Braddock is on his game. Parker gave me a quizzical look. I sighed. Not a fan. After Parker had left for the gym, I went back over to the painting. It was still sitting in the last place that I had left it. It still had the napkin over it. The bad vibes that I felt earlier was still there. In fact, they had grown worse. I didn't even want this thing in my house anymore, covered or not. And despite my misgivings, I pulled the napkin off the painting and I gave it a once-over. I felt my stomach gurgle and my throat went dry. Looking at this now literally caused a physical pain. It didn't make sense. Where's the front door? I suddenly asked myself out loud. The front door of the house was gone. blacked out like an actor with perfect teeth coloring in one to look sufficiently destitute for a role. I scraped where the door had been with my thumb. No fresh paint. It was like it had always been that way, but it hadn't. I checked the photo that I sent to my mom to confirm. What in the... There was a creak on the basement stairs. There very much shouldn't have been a creak on the basement stairs. The basement was home to nothing but dust, Christmas decorations, and my ugly childhood couches that we didn't have the heart to throw away. Since none of those things can walk, this made no sense. I tiptoed to the knife block and pulled out a butcher knife. With my phone in my free hand, I used my nimble thumb to unlock it. I was ready to dial 911, but as I stared at my reflection in the knife blade, I questioned whether I was prepared to stick it into another person. I wouldn't know that until it came to that moment. I very much prayed that that wouldn't happen. Another creak near the top of the stairs now. It was getting closer. I flexed the grip on the knife. I tried to control my breathing but couldn't. Turns out that all that woo-woo TikTok relaxation breathing stuff was all just bullshit. My heart was thumping like an angry jazz drummer's long-awaited solo. I felt sweat drip down my neck. Something flickered on the painting. It momentarily took my eyes off the basement door. Like last night, I initially registered nothing different, but then I noticed, through the window of the living room, it looked like someone had turned on a light or lit a fire. Splotches of yellow and orange paint filled the window frame. The jingling of the basement door handle snapped me out of my trance. My palms were sweaty. My legs swayed like bamboo in a strong breeze. I gathered all my remaining strength and I yelled out, "Hey, stay away from me!" I wanted to say more, but overwhelming fear shut me up. The jiggling stopped. Relief. My hectoring had worked for about 2 seconds. The basement door cracked open, and there was a ghostly, pale face staring back at me. That was when my brain firmly decided whether I was a flight or fight kind of girl. I was a flight. Yeah, screw this. I dropped the knife, which clattered on the tile like that drummer hitting the hi-hat, and I sprinted toward my front door. I yelled gibberish the entire time, tears streaming down my face, and I blasted out of the door. My fingers hit send on the call, and seconds later, an annoyingly even-keeled 911 operator connected me with the police. Parker returned home before the police arrived. He found me sitting inside my locked car. Before he could crack a joke, he caught sight of my face. I had been crying and I could feel how puffy my eyes were. Consternation crossed his face. I rolled the window down. "Get in the car." He did, and I explained everything to him. He was astonished. He was confused. He grabbed my hand and held it steady as I went over everything, pausing occasionally to sob like a child with a skinned knee. When I was done, he asked why I didn't leave right away. "Who do you think you are, Rambo?" I laughed. I needed that. For a few seconds I was, and then I wasn't. I wasn't even Gizmo pretending to be Rambo. He gave my arm a loving squeeze. "Hey, if it'll help you calm down, we can watch some pro wiffle ball tonight. I hear the Rhinos are playing the Turkeys." "The Storks," I said. "But they are actually playing the Habaneros tonight. And Gil Faust is looking to debut his chili ball pitch." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "But you're not a fan." "I'm not." A knock on the window caused me to scream. The cops had arrived. If they were curious why we were sitting in our car, they kept it to themselves. I relayed what happened and they said that they would go into the basement and check it out. 15 minutes later, they came walking out. "Yeah, we didn't see anyone down there," the cop said. But to be fair to you, your basement gave me the heebie-jeebies." "Great," I said. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the truth. On the plus side, I haven't seen that love seat since I was a kid. You want it? It's better left to the past. You two have a nice day." We watched them leave. Parker turned to me. "You okay?" "No, and I won't be until I can go into the basement myself." "What? Why?" "I can't explain it, but something's drawing me there. It sounds crazy, I know, but I feel it in my bones." Parker saw the determined look in my eyes. This was going to happen. It had to happen. He sighed. "You want me to go first?" "Yes," I said. "Are you actually going to wait for me to go in or follow right behind me?" "Oh, we both know the answer to that." Resuming our reverse waltz, we went back into the house. Once in the kitchen, we stopped near the painting. Parker looked over and agreed that there were changes. We turned our attention to the closed basement door. Parker put his hand on the handle. "Hey, we don't have to go down here, Bonnie," he said. "The cops didn't find anyone." "Alive. If there's a ghost in this house, I need to know. If we know, we can remove it." "How?" "Oh, I'm still working on that part," I said. "But I need to know for certain. I won't feel safe otherwise." I'm inclined to just say yes and move on. Something altered the painting already. I mean, who the hell did that? "One issue at a time," I said. He knew that he couldn't talk his way out of this. He knew that I needed this, and he loved me enough to see it through to the end. Even though he was petrified too. The skin on his arm had goosebumps as soon as we had walked into the kitchen. It felt like Braille to me now, and the only thing that it said was, "Oh, let's not do this." But that feeling in my brain, the one drawing me down there, wouldn't leave. It was stronger now that we were in the home. Something was loose in my house. I knew it in my heart. Whatever it was, I needed to keep it from roosting in my new home. I let the ghosts live in the past. Leave my future alone. And Parker gripped the handle, sighed so loudly that it was heard 2 towns over, and he opened the door. The stairs led down into the dark of the basement. The floor around the landing was the only thing visible. In the abstract, it wasn't anything. Right now, though, horrifying. Parker found the light switch, illuminating the rest of the space. So far, so good. We took our time walking down the stairs, creaking along the wooden one step at a time. Maybe it would have the same effect on the ghost that hearing the creaking steps did on me. Perhaps the phantom was hiding, holding a ghost knife and deciding if it was going to play Ghost Rambo or just fearfully disappear into the walls. The house in the painting had a basement too, I whispered. When I was a kid, I hated going down there. Any time of the day. It just didn't feel natural, you know. Are you trying to get me to stop doing this? Sorry, I'm rambling, I said. I kept right on rambling though. What bothered me wasn't so much about going down there. What scared me was the trip back up. Turning your back on the dark. I used to walk backwards up the stairs. Yeah, we can try that in a few minutes, Parker whispered back. Any other ghost stories you want to share before we hit the landing? Sorry, I said. It just popped into my mind. I haven't thought about that fear in years. Since we moved away from there, actually. That's not comforting. We got to the bottom and I took a look around. Everything looked normal. No surprises. Just our old, ugly furniture and friendly Santa decorations smiling and giving us a frozen wave. I thought about turning and heading back up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be down here. I was almost positive that Parker would be furious if I went darting up the stairs without him. Leaving him alone in Spook Central might be grounds for divorce. When we headed over to the furniture, there was a layer of dust on everything. I smacked the pillow, sending it flying into the air. I coughed and sneezed, instantly regretting my actions. Parker's withering glare told me that he wasn't fond of my actions either. Sorry. I don't see anything out of the ordinary here, do you? No, it looks like it always does. Is the feeling gone? Can we go back upstairs now? Before I could answer, we heard the familiar chime from our security system, followed by the calm, reassuring voice informing us that our front door was open. What the hell? I said. Shh, Parker responded, his finger to his lips. He pointed up to the ceiling, and we cocked our ears and concentrated. For about 20 seconds, there was nothing. Silence. It didn't last. The floorboards wheezed as someone took slow, deliberate steps above us. I could hear the footfalls as they moved from the front door to the hallway. Trembling, Parker pointed up at the ceiling. You could physically see the floor bow over ever so slightly from the person's weight. I didn't even think that that was possible. What do we do? I whispered. I don't know. Maybe they'll leave. A second later, we were cloaked in total darkness. All the power in the house had gone out. The only light came from the sunlight streaming in from the open door at the top of the stairs. It wasn't much, but it was a beacon. Our lighthouse. Our way home. That is all I was able to say. Someone upstairs ran down the hall, through the kitchen into the basement door. They slammed it shut, plunging us into instant midnight. I wanted to scream, to yell so loud that it would shake the heavens, but I couldn't. My body physically couldn't make that happen. It would give away our location. I clutched Parker's shirt so hard that I was afraid that I would rip it right off him. If it bothered him, he didn't say. "Oh, this sucks," Parker mumbled. Understatement of the century.
Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas!
One of our Santa decorations started going off. I nearly peed myself at Santa's sudden arrival. I imagined it would have been the same response I would have had if I had seen him as a kid. Kris Kringle was soon joined by all of our Christmas decorations going off at once. Dozens of laughing Santas, lights flickering off and on, inflatables rising like zombified plastic bags. The noise was deafening but strangely festive. The strobing lights in the pitch black caused after images to dance in my rods and cones. I slammed them shut and silently prayed for all of this to end. Someone must have heard because as quickly as they had come to life, they stopped. We stood in the darkness, not breathing, not moving. Neither of us knew what to do. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I couldn't shake the idea that whatever was coming would be worse than what we had already experienced. There was a creaking again and a sudden rushing of blinding sunlight from the top of the stairs. Somebody had opened the door. Before we could get a glimpse, the door slammed shut and something sprinted down the now dark stairs. I pulled Parker back onto the old love seat. We sat on the edge and kept our heads on a swivel. Even though the basement was too dark to see our own hands, we weren't alone anymore. As my fingertips grazed the couch, I realized something. These were originally my parents. My parents had got them when I was living in the house from the painting. They were a physical connection between the past and now. Are these what caused my sudden desire to come to the basement? Was I being manipulated by this thing? Could I trust myself at all? That dread feeling that I had had since I brought the painting into our house intensified. I felt it in my bones, deeper even. My aura, my soul. I leaned into Parker's ear and whispered an apology. He didn't vocalize a response, but he squeezed my arm and I squeezed it back. My body shook and I couldn't get myself to stop. I wanted to run for the stairs, but that old fear came rushing back. I knew that if I ran up those stairs, it would follow behind me. As something whooshed by us, my hair flowed with it, trailing behind whatever it sprinted past. I nervously dug my fingers into the fabric. We heard the sound of some liquid splattering on the floor across from us. It was water, no, heavier than water. A sound that made my guts twist soon joined the drips and splashes. Someone started whistling a familiar tune. Pop Goes the Weasel. The Christmas decorations flickered on and off. In the brief flash of light, we could make out a figure standing across from us. Craig Moffat.
Pop
He screamed as the light strobed.
goes
He screamed again, a foot closer this time.
the
Another foot closer, almost directly in front of us now. The lights flickered again, and his face was right next to mine. A sinister smile as he slowly whispered.
weasel.
I felt something wet and slimy rub against my cheek. Parker stood and surprisingly swung at Ghost Craig. It didn't find the ghoul, and as the darkness returned, his fist only found the arm of the couch. I heard his knuckles crack and him swear in pain. My ears were the only thing working at that moment, though. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. The lights in the house came back on and I screamed. On the wall across from us, where we had heard the water, the painting was hanging. Only it wasn't the old house. It was the current house. All the windows and doors were filled with flames, and there were two figures on the front lawn. Parker and I. We were both dead. Standing behind our oak tree watching it all was Craig Moffat. "Parker, let's go!" I didn't have to tell him twice. We broke for the stairs and took them 3 at a time until we made it to the top. I grabbed the handle and shoved my shoulder into the door, expecting it to hold firm. It didn't. Parker and I spilled onto our kitchen floor. I scrambled up and practically yanked Parker into the kitchen. I was about to slam the door when I saw Craig Moffat standing at the bottom of the stairs. We locked eyes and my mind flew back to my childhood, a memory stored deep in the folds of my brain. I was sitting on our porch reading a book and I heard that whistling. Craig Moffat, a Polaroid camera in his hands and portrait photos on his mind. I was afraid that he would stop and take a picture of me. I was right. Even now, I could hear the heavy clunk of the shutter and the whirring of the processing photo as it slid out. He shook it, and as the fog of war slowly dissipated on the photos, he smiled.
This way, I won't forget you.
I slammed the door shut and urged Parker to grab the car keys. He turned the corner to do so when I heard him sharply yelp in surprise, followed by the squeak of his sneakers on the hardwood and his butt hitting the ground. I ran into him expecting to see Craig, but I was stunned by the sight of a living man surrounded by 2 yellow hulks outside my front door. Once my brain had processed the information, it was clear that those men were wearing biohazard suits. It still didn't answer why men in biohazard suits were outside my door, but it cleared up that there were. The suitless man in the middle, though, had a more striking resemblance to the ghost that I had just seen in my basement, only younger, fuller, and fleshy. "Sorry to startle you both," the man said, raising his hands in peace. "You had contacted us about a painting you found. I'm David Moffat. Craig was my father." "You've got to be shitting me. You were supposed to talk on the phone," I said. "Yes, but we were worried that things might have progressed too much by then. Tell me, has the door in the painting disappeared yet?" "How did—" David turned to his men. "A call for the extraction team." Turning back to us, he urgently asked, "Where's the painting?" "The basement," I said, "but it looks different now." "What in the hell is going on?" Parker asked. "Different? Would you say violently different? Like our dead bodies on the lawn and the place ablaze, violently different." He nervously turned to where the biohazard-suited men had gone. "The experienced extraction team." Parker stood and held my hand. We looked at each other and back at David Moffat. We both cracked. Small smiles that turned into chuckles that turned into a laughing fit. I read somewhere that mental breaks can start like this. Whatever, I leaned in. "David Moffat, the son of your childhood painter neighbor Craig Moffat, himself a ghost that nearly killed us, is standing in our veranda," Parker said, barely able to get the words out between screeching laughter. "I mean, what the hell is this life?" Seconds later, a team of armed men in hazmat suits carrying unknown machinery rushed in and headed for the basement. We heard one of them scream and then the sounds of mechanical engines warming up. David nodded toward the front door. "We should go outside." We did. I mean, what the hell else were we going to do? Once we were outside, David pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered us one. We both declined. David indulged and nodded back at the house. "This is the experienced team." "What's going on?" I asked. "I'm gonna level with you. What I'm about to say is pretty weird. I like to say weird to people, it sets the right tone. Sir, on what is easily the weirdest day in not only my and my wife's life, but I would argue humanity's life, nothing that you can say will top what we've already been through," Parker said. "I mean, I just discovered that my wife watches professional wiffle ball, for God's sake." "Not a fan," I mumbled. "Dad was a strange man. Lots of demons. When he could keep them at bay, he did great work, but that was never for long. Around the time when you were a kid, he got deep into the occult. It was a faddish passing fancy at first, but soon he found a deeper meaning in it. It consumed him. Around this time, well, he conjured a demon. I think I'm having a stroke. He made a deal. We don't exactly know the details, but what we do know is that Dad agreed to start a company that would paint portraits of people's homes. The twist was that the homes he picked would become targets for the demon. Naturally, Parker said, because why not? He would take a photo of the home and give it to the demon. The demon would curse it and insert it into the canvases of my dad's paintings. These photos would be a connection between the subjects in the art and the demon itself. The pull got stronger when the artwork found its way back to the subjects. And then they would, well, he trailed off. Meet each other, I said. In a matter of speaking, yes. So many questions bounced around my brain. This all sounded so outlandish, and yet the memory of the photo came back to me. This way, I won't forget you, I said out loud. Confused, Parker looked at me. What? We don't know how many paintings Dad did during this time, but we've recovered 65 in locations from New York to California. The people selected seem to be random, except for you. Why me? Well, my guess, you were neighbors and well, my dad really didn't like your dad. Oh, the feeling was mutual. Just then, the extraction team came rushing out. One was limping. The machines they had brought looked broken, but the lights were still on. One of them had the painting in a biocontainment bag. It was smoking. The experienced team, David said, ashing out his smoke on the bottom of his shoe and pocketing the butt. Thank you for letting us help rid you of this menace. The work is exhausting, but my family has to atone for Craig's wicked actions. And David nodded and turned to leave. I reached out and grabbed his shoulder. Wait, that's it? We're free just like that. And just like that, he said, turning to leave. He stopped and spun on his heels. Unless you have something from the old house in your new house, then you kinda sorta leave a back door for the demon to return. So if you do, I suggest destroying it. He tipped his cap and laughed. Parker and I locked eyes. The love seat. We said at the same time. My back hurt just thinking about hauling it up those narrow stairs. Later that night, we torched the sofa in a makeshift fire pit in our backyard. We ate pizza and watched the flames consume the potentially demonic couch. I can't imagine that's a sentence that's been said a lot in history. As we did, relief filled my heart. The dread was gone. I looked over at Parker and smiled. I think we can put to bed the argument about who had the weirder childhood, Park. He laughed. Yeah, summers with my Amish family can't compete with demons. His phone buzzed and he looked down at the notification with concern. I felt my stomach twist. Oh, please tell me that it's good news. Yeah, it is. The Rhinos Habaneros game is about to start. What? I set a reminder for you. Do you want to watch? I touched my heart and felt pure happiness surge through me. Tears. Grabbing his free hand, I held it tight and I gave it a big squeeze. I have something to confess. I think I'm a legitimate fan of professional wiffle ball. I know, babe. I know. We sat together, letting the crackling of a burning demon couch and the crack of a wiffle ball bat fill the night air. I snuggled into Parker's shoulder. It was warm, inviting. Home and not one haunted by an angry ghost. How did one girl get so lucky? October 4th, 2023. And this will be the fourth time that I've gone north for work, and I have to admit I'm more nervous about it than I've ever been years prior. I can't shake the feeling this voyage will be significant, but perhaps that is because I intend for it to be my last. My wife Lori and I are expecting a newborn girl soon, and this money will help us have a home for our new family. For this reason, I figure I should pass along all that I've learned to anyone else that might be also thinking of spending the next 6 to 8 weeks on a boat here. Some of these tips can likely be found on a million other posts just like this one, but it's good to be reminded, and it's even better if this is your first time. Here goes. And bring appropriate socks, ones that keep your feet warm and away from moisture. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. It's gonna be freezing and you don't want frostbite on your toes. And get plenty of them too. You're gonna be on your feet the majority of the time and you're gonna need to swap them out pretty often just to stay dry. If you can, get wool. And don't dress to impress. This is a dirty job. I remember one girl came in a pantsuit and hardly lasted a day and a half. Another time a guy brought his whole wardrobe. 4 suitcases. Ridiculous, really. Once you're out there to sea for 3 weeks or more, no one's gonna give a shit what you look like. If smoking tobacco, make sure to bring your own. And don't share. It's expensive up there and you ain't there to make friends. Remember, the day and night cycle is a little different in Alaska, and it's gonna take time for you to adjust. You're gonna have sleepless nights. You're gonna see things. I know I have. You're gonna meet a lot of idiots, but focus on the reason that you're there. It's a hard job working long hours and no contact with anyone in the world except your fellow deckhands, but it's worth it in the end for that paycheck. Find a captain that isn't a pushover and isn't trying to be the next Ahab. I know beggars can't be choosers, but there are literally tons of these jobs available and they hire anyone. I had a criminal record myself, and the ship that I found a home with only asked a few basic questions, like could I withstand being on my feet for 15 hours a day? See, I told you the socks were important. And did I understand that this job was a matter of life and death? So be open and honest about any record that you have. It can go a long way to impress the companies who are basically giving you free room and board. My buddy Eddie said that he prefers doing the processing plants on land, but not me. Most of those end up eating at your pocketbook with hidden fees and wasting time waiting for work. I like to get it done and get back home. The high seas are the place for me. I expect that I'll likely earn a little over $20,000 while I'm here, so it's worth the headache. I can basically be off my main job for half the year and still make a decent living. Now, of course, these are just your basic tips, and I guess it's not really fair to only share those and not include the basic day-to-day affairs of life. Make sure you bring some Dramamine patches to help you cope with the seasickness. Be prepared to be bored for the most part. There are some days that you may catch absolutely nothing, and others where you'll think it's the mother lode. That's just the job. It's unpredictable. On average, there are over 400 boats that go up the Bering Sea this time of year, so finding one isn't that difficult. Just grab a list of names and a dartboard and you can't go wrong. October 6th. The Silver Beauty. That's the ship that I got with last year. My crew of misfits that I had to call family for 2 months. I managed to sign up with them again this year, and I'm glad to not be the greenhorn. There's 6 of us aboard the ship this time, myself included, and while most ships need about double that many men aboard, we are the exception to every rule. I sailed with them last year and I nearly lost my life. That's because of an incident that happened while I was working on the cages. We actually lost one of our deckhands, Unlucky Pete. A crane malfunctioned and smashed his leg because he had pushed me out of the way. We were over 32 miles from shore, so he bled out. I was now the one that got that moniker, told that if it hadn't been for Pete, I would be crushed entirely. We couldn't even offer the poor sap anything for the pain, so we just laid in his cot and cried in agony until he died. As I board the ship, I can still hear his moans near that wretched piece of machinery, blaming me for living. I made sure to ask for a job further from the crane this year. October 11th. We are miles away from civilization now. Only the darkness of the ocean to comfort my disquieted thoughts. In case you didn't know, just about any sailor worth his salt is a little superstitious, and Captain Reich Sullivan is definitely more that way than most. Sully decided to take us over toward the Russian border, where a lot of Opelio are nestled. But he did so near the beginning of the season, and that's when the storms are really rough. Still, we all knew that if we could catch a big load here, it might mean that we could take it easy during the colder weeks. Of course, that's honestly just wishful thinking, cause Sully works us twice as hard to get double the pay, with double the pain along the way. And ordinarily that's okay with me. But this time, something was different. It started around day 4 of the early harvest. It was my turn to cast the line and haul up the cages, and the sea just wasn't cooperating. If you've ever been out there when this sort of wave hits, then you know that one false move can crush your whole body. And that's if you're fortunate. So there I was, wearing my full rain gear alongside the greenhorn of the year named Kent, Tried my best to stay standing as the boat tipped and rolled. Kent wasn't doing so well with the different shifts in the water, which made it double the work for me to watch him and to handle the line. What normally took about 15 minutes was taking longer also because of the storm. And then finally we managed to lug the cage up, only to find it wasn't just crabs that we had brought up from the water. A crash of lightning illuminated the sky behind the cage to give us a better look at it. But even in that brief moment, it was difficult to really say for sure what it was. Hank, a senior deckhand, unlatched the cage and let the crabs spill out so that we could get a better look at our discovery. It's a corpse. Kent realized once we had managed to pull it from the mesh. I shined a flashlight over it to confirm what he said, surprised to find that most of the flesh was blackened but still relatively fresh, as though the body had been mummified. "The captain on deck," Dylan, our navigator, declared as Sully came down to investigate our find. "What is that thing?" he muttered, disgusted by the sight and smell. The men mumbled different responses, no one daring to confess that we weren't sure what it was. "Whatever it is, we should toss it back overboard," Hank decided. Steven, the crane operator who was basically Sully's second-in-command, had another idea. "Well, hold on, Captain. Maybe this thing might be worth something. Could be a reward for the authorities," he suggested. Sullivan paused and rubbed the stubble on his chin for a moment as we all stared at the corpse, trying to decide what to do. "Hey, did anybody notice that the storm died down?" Kent asked nervously. I remember seeing that the sky was actually clear. It was extremely calm. Like suddenly, the sea had just gone quiet. "Oh, it's a bad omen," Dylan muttered. Sully made the sign of the cross. "Whatever it is, we'll take it with us back to Dutch Harbor next week. The Coast Guard can sort it out," he decided. "So, what do we do with it until then?" I remember asking. It felt weird considering that for the most part, our storage was designed for nothing besides rows and rows of sorted crab. "He can't stay in the cage. I bet they'd eat up what little is left of him," Hank remarked as he gestured toward the hull that we had brought up with the corpse. We have a few crates in the hull. Take the thing down there and store it in one. Probably just some poor soul that came out here to try and make a few bucks like us. God rest his soul," Steven decided. Sully agreed with the decision and then ordered all the men back to work except me and Dylan, and we got to be the corpse haulers. "And bring that stretcher over here," I told the greenhorn as I kept staring at the mangled body. Something about it unsettled me more than I cared to admit. And call it a sixth sense if you will, but I knew that the body couldn't possibly be from another fishing boat. It looked older, a lot more so than any of us could imagine. And Dylan mirrored my fears as we moved the body over to the stretcher and he commented, "This corpse is a lot older than just a few seasons back. Look at the decay. That's like what you would see over in Egypt. It's gotta be at least 100 years old or something. How is it even still down here?" "Maybe the algae and brine made it age faster," I suggested. It was a flimsy excuse, but I didn't want to focus on it any more than I needed to. The longer that we were here with it, the more uneasy I felt. "We just need to go seal this thing up and get back to working," I told him. We made it to the hull and I found one of the crates, motioning Dylan to help me lift the corpse up into it. As we did, the whole ship tipped again and one of the bone fragments scraped against Dylan's leg. Instinctively, he cursed and dropped the corpse, the mangled remains collapsing into the box as I checked his wound. "Best get Hank to check that out once we're in calmer waters," I suggested. We finished sealing up the crate and got back on deck. I remember thinking that it seemed like the sky was more gray than usual. as though the entire ocean was an ominous warning for us about our discovery. But I tried to push the superstitions aside and focus on the work. And Dylan couldn't though. The rest of the day he seemed dizzy and sidetracked. He kept favoring his left side and sometimes wound up accidentally letting a line out when he was supposed to be towing. I knew that he was going to hear an earful from Sully when we stopped for the day. "What's gotten into you, man? I give you one simple job." Sully screamed as Dylan leaned over the edge and started to hurl. Turning the greenhorn around, I couldn't help but to notice a patch of his skin seemed to have blackened and bruised. The same area where he had been damaged by the corpse. "Jesus Christ, you okay, boy?" Sully asked. Dylan's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed on the deck as the next wave crashed into us. I stood frigid in terror as he shook violently as though having a seizure. I wasn't sure, but it sounded like he was saying something, although it just sounded like gibberish. Still, the entire incident left me even more tense than before. What we had brought up from the waters was evil. Hank and Steven got him below deck to help him recover as I finished up the haul with Sully as he steered us toward a calmer segment of the strait that we were in. He was adamant that we weren't leaving the area despite Dylan's injury, but by nightfall it seemed like he was changing his tune because of how bad it looked. The entire leg might need amputation," Hank said as I checked on them. Dylan's leg was green and flesh was falling off in the area where the bone had scraped him. It made me sick to even look at it, but I did mention to the captain my concern about the corpse. "That thing might have parasites or bacteria on it," I said after I explained how Dylan had gotten hurt. It was unnerving to see the greenhorn shake uncontrollably at random times, but perhaps more so when I realized that Hank seemed to have had no clue what could be ailing him. "Never seen a sickness like this in the 32 years I've been at sea," he admitted. "Nothing spreads that fast." "Oh, can you perform a brief autopsy on the corpse? Maybe get a few samples," Sully suggested. All of us were hesitant to get anywhere near the body again, but we knew better than to argue with the captain. I went with Hank to the hull, grabbing a flashlight, and he got a crowbar to open the crate as we approached it. "And this is the one, you're sure?" Hank asked, checking it. I felt my heart drop. The seal had been broken, the metallic frame of the crate ripped off, and on the inside where the corpse had just been hours ago, I saw scratches and claw marks. They were fresh. Neither of us said anything as I moved the flashlight around the room cautiously. Suddenly, I no longer felt alone. Somewhere in these shadows, I was certain that we were being watched. "Go tell the captain and get a gun," I told Hank as we slowly backed away from the crate toward the stairs. To my left, I heard something rattle. A piece of metal gently rolling across the tiles of the deck. My flashlight focused on it, and I saw what looked like little droplets of blood trailing toward the side of the boat. There was a small porthole here, and Hank and I both turned white as ghosts when we saw that the glass was broken, and something had pushed its way out of the window, leaving a mess of tattered flesh and bodily fluids behind. I went to the next porthole over and stuck my head out, looking up the side of the ship. I could just barely see indentations on the metal frame. Something had crawled its way toward the stern of our ship. And then I saw it. A dark silhouette dangling from the side of the frame, just near the crane. Carefully, I pulled my light up to see its lengthy, half-rotting body. It was larger than I had anticipated, as though once it had become reanimated, it had grown twice in size. A splash of waves hit me, causing me to drop the flashlight and cuss, and the creature turned its head toward me, revealing a ghastly, slanted face with elongated, torn ears, misshapen nostrils, and jagged teeth. The last thing that I heard as Hank pulled me back in was a shriek, like it was on the hunt. Hank didn't even need to ask what I had seen. My trembling features told the whole story. And then a long, blackened arm reached through the porthole with a snarl, its large claw-like fingers grabbing at the older man and slamming him toward the wall. I shouted his name as I heard the reanimated corpse scream, and Hank tried desperately to get away, the monster ripping his ear off as he was continuously being pulled through the distorted metal. I grabbed the crowbar that Hank had been holding and I swung at the arm, hitting it repeatedly until at last the creature let go. Snagging him up, Hank covered his ear and tried to push away tears as we ran up the storage stairs to the open deck. I didn't turn back to see if the creature was following us, instead racing across the wet floor to where I saw Kent preparing a line and shouted, "Get inside, now!" The younger man turned to us, his eyes widening as he looked at Hank and then saw something above us. A moment later, the creature had hurled its body across the frame of the boat right on top of Kent, pushing him down and pulling his chest open like it was little more than a stuffed animal. I covered my mouth, watching as Kent begged us to help, backing away toward the mess hall. Hank and I got inside and slammed the door shut. The last thing I saw was the poor man's pleading eyes before the monster ripped them out. Steven was there still monitoring Dylan, looking confused as he saw Hank's injury and then watched me push the table over to the door to jam it shut. "What the hell? What's going on out there?" he asked. Hank sat down next to the stove, using the fire to cauterize his wound as he winced in pain, and I did my best to explain what we had just experienced. "That corpse, it isn't dead. It's like a living monster or something. It just killed Kent," I told him, trying to catch my breath. Steven gave a skeptical look, but then heard the strange, guttural noises from outside and reconsidered. "What in God's green earth is that?" he whispered as he got a look at the creature while it finished off Kent. And behind us, we heard Dylan stir and cough, hardly able to form words as he was trying to talk. I heard a single, ragged word from his parched lips. "Dragger, we have to kill it with the sea. Sink the ship if we have to," he mumbled as he tried to sit. I got a good look at his sunken features and yellowing eyes, realizing that he was almost entirely infected by the beast now. "It's inside my head, Frank, like a termite gnawing on a log. It's skittering around in my thoughts, telling me that I need to kill you, tear your flesh apart and feast on your bones," Dylan said as I realized Steven had wisely already strapped the boy down. How long would those restraints hold was up for debate, I realized as he lurched forward and the entire thing shook. "I will infect you next, all of you. You have to kill me and destroy this ship before it gets back to port. It's the only way," he begged. I looked out the other porthole, realizing that we were in fact moving east again. "The captain made the call days ago, and he's pushing us to Dutch Harbor faster because of this mess," Steven admitted. "Where is the captain now?" Hank asked as he stood up after finishing his stitching on his ear. A little dry blood leaked down his cheek as we all heard the strange monster search for a way to reach us. "Up in the observatory. That thing will go after him next," Steven realized frantically as he moved to push the table out of the way again. "No, we can't leave. Out there we have nowhere to hide," I warned. Steven pushed me away and gave the empty deck a quick glance. "The two of you need to distract it. Topple the cages and make noise over on the starboard side. I'll make my way to the crane. With luck on our side, I can use that thing to knock the monster back to the waves," he decided. I gave Hank a look that told him I thought the plan was idiotic, but honestly, I couldn't think of anything better. All those tips and tricks I had managed to keep in my head for years felt useless against this living nightmare. On the count of 3, Steven instructed, ready to race across the deck. I don't remember those words or what happened next. I focused on my task of belting across to the crab pots. I thought of all the times I had been instructed how to properly prepare them, to make sure that none of the crabs made it out. All of that was now going out the window as I released the first and second latch, and then pushed barrels of raw meat onto the floor, anything to confuse the monster. Across the boat, I saw Steven hurrying up the crane ladder, shouting at us to make more noise as my eyes searched for any sign of the Draugr. It was standing there amid the bait, almost 8 feet tall. It looked healthier now, leaner and more strong than I cared to admit, but every bit as vicious. The boat rocked as it moved toward us, and I tried to think of what to do. And get to the captain and steer us away from port. Hank ordered me, pushing me toward the observatory stairs, just as the creature made a long jump straight toward him. I didn't dare look back as I went to the captain's chambers, shouting for him to alter course. And then I saw his body, split in two against the wheel of the ship, his eyes still open in agony from what the Draugr had done to him. A second later, what was left of Hank smashed against the observation glass, his innards sliding down the side of the ship, as I stared down at the seemingly unstoppable beast that stood in the center of the deck. Hank's body fell through the shattered glass, tumbling over the foghorn, which made the creature surprisingly freeze in place as if confused by the noise. I decided to hold on it further, shouting at Steven to finish the job. The loud noise made the Draugr an easy target for our crane. My mind flashed back to Lucky Pete as the metallic hook slammed against the creature, flinging it up in the air and overboard. I stood there almost in a hypnotic trance for the longest, overcome with the trauma of all that had transpired. Hours later, we have sent the corpses of Kent, Hank, and Captain Sully to the watery grave. All that remains now is Dylan. We've sequestered him in the mess hall, and Steven and I are unsure if we can even get inside to risk finishing the job, because all we hear are the same strange noises the monster made. And Dylan is likely too far gone to be saved, but I will wait until daylight and then finish the job while Steven focuses on getting us home. He isn't as skilled as the captain navigating these waters, but I can't think of any other solution when we are alone out here. October 15th. I woke to the sound of something hitting the water, and I stepped out on deck to see Steven had just pushed the last of our supplies over the railing. "What is wrong with you? Are you mad?" I asked him, getting a good look at his complexion. He showed no signs of the corruption that had taken Dylan, but still clearly was losing sanity fast. "We don't know if any of this ain't cursed. Look at the sky, Frank. It's a clear day, but still as dark as the witching hour." I did as I was told, disturbed to realize that he was quite right. The sea was so calm that we couldn't even use the currents to push us, and the air was dead. All around the boat, I saw fish slowly dredging up from below. Nothing was able to stay alive as our little boat moved through the waves. "We're cursed. We must kill that thing now if we hope to even have a fighting chance," he insisted. I looked across the cage floor to the mess hall. It had been eerily quiet all night. Had the transformation finished? Was Dylan in some strange hibernation? There would only be one way to find out. I went to the nearby debris from the cages and got a splintered wooden pike, grasping it firmly as I told Steven that I would finish the job. "No matter what you do, move the boat south. If I get turned, I'll end myself before the infection has a chance to spread," I told him. I walked across the crate floor and flung the mess hall door open, half expecting Dylan to lunge at me when I did. To my surprise, he was instead sitting stiff on the cot across the way, his legs still shackled, but looking nothing like the boy that I had met days ago. His skin was now entirely a cool blackish blue, as though he had been bruised from head to toe, and sharp black veins ran from his neck to his creases around his blackish yellow eyes. His hair was a pale and crackly brown, and his teeth were like sharks. needling outward as he looked at me with a curious ferocity. He was at least twice as large too, the clothes hardly fitting, and leaving behind a bulging, bulk nightmare of a brute. I wasn't sure the shackling would even hold him long enough for me to get across the room and stake his heart.
I can smell your fear,
The boy spoke. His voice was raspy and his breath rancid. It'll all be over soon. I can free you, I told him as I took a tentative step forward.
Strange. I was about to give you the same offer.
Let me end your suffering, Dylan. I owe you that much.
Oh, the boy you knew is gone. I am a new form, not of the living nor the dead. I walk a path meant for gods, one where suffering is not a curse but a blessing.
He hissed. He stood up, the metallic clasp on his leg buckling easily.
I could crush you like a twig where you stand, tear your flesh from starboard to port in a matter of minutes, and make sure you felt every single moment of it.
Dylan rasped. My heart beat faster as he proved his point by crossing the room in a mere second, towering over me now.
Do you know why you still live?
The drugger asked. In response, I raised the stake up and slammed it against his chest, desperate to drive it in. It didn't even make the behemoth flinch. Instead, he pulled me up like a rag doll and took the stake out, pinning me to the side of the door with it where I hung like a sinner from the crucifix.
Let me show you the wonders that I'm capable of.
Dylan told me as he stepped out toward the deck, his eyes focusing on the observatory. He raised his hands up just as I saw Stephen realize what was happening, and then the towering vampire transformed into a swarm of deadly flaming bats. Their endless shrieking swirled about toward Stephen, smashing into the glass like bullets and slicing at his flesh aimlessly. I heard him scream and beg for help, but there was no one left. It didn't stop for hours. I hung there against the hull of the Silver Beauty for a day, starving and waiting for Dylan to return and finish me off. He never did. Instead, the ship hit against rocks and I found myself at the mercy of rescue workers after 3 days, looking like a mad sailor who had lost their entire crew to the merciless ocean. When they let me down, they asked me if there were any other survivors, and I thought of Dylan. I had no idea where the drugger had disappeared to, nor why he had allowed me to live, but I told them that I knew of no one. The official report I gave claimed that a severe storm had occurred and killed the others. I had grown ill and placed myself at the mercy of the waters, hoping to join them in the depths. I was told that I would be given mandatory therapy for 2 months, and small compensation for the voyage. Not anything close to what I had been promised, but honestly, I was thankful to just be alive. I called Lori from a hotel that night, blubbering like an idiot and apologizing. Why do you keep saying that you're sorry? This isn't your fault, she kept saying. But I knew that it was different. And that beast now roamed free because of the incident on that boat. I had not acted quickly enough to kill the boy. Now all of them were dead because of me. October 17th. I received a letter telling me that a small service for the crew of the Silver Beauty would be held near the port of call where we had first left, and I left first thing at early light to pay my respects. The harbor was quite empty save for the office where I was told to wait. Inside, I saw that there were 6 coffins prepared, 1 for each of the crew. Wait, 6? I froze in place as one of the coffin lids opened and Dylan sat up and turned toward me. The others slowly did the same, revealing the undead crew members, some of whom looked like they were hardly a mangle of flesh and bones left. All of them under the thrall of their new master, who gestured toward the empty coffin on his left.
The sea waits for us, my child. We must return and tread across the dark waters to be found once more.
Dylan told me. My fingers touched the rim of the coffin as tears streamed down my face. Please, I have a wife and a child on the way, I begged.
Who else do you think I would call to cast us off?
The Draugr responded. I heard the door to the viewing room close and my heart shuddered as I saw Lori standing there drenched in fresh blood. A hole was ruptured where our unborn had once been, and I realized that the monster had targeted her first to regain full strength, to ensure my cooperation as a dark servant. Lori crossed the threshold and offered me a knife to finish the task, and I wordlessly took it, using it on my wrists as I climbed into the coffin. Do not fear, my love. This is only the beginning, she swore, her dead eyes smiling down at me. I shuddered and cried, fighting against the dark as the coffins closed shut. What came next was only the inescapable horrors of death. October 21st. A ship found my body 23 miles from Dutch Harbor. I am still shaking from the cold. They have questions about why I might attempt a funeral at sea for myself. I have promised that I will answer all of them once they gather the crew together. They are weary of trusting a man that they dredged up from the ocean, but I will show them the new path that has led me here. I will lead them to the dark depths that my master has prepared for us below. It's difficult to adjust to having something change the way you do or see ordinary things, like brushing your teeth. After getting stuck with sore, I got a lot more conscious about my teeth and mouth. It took some time getting used to the feeling of having something in my throat ready to shoot out like a coiled snake, or having breakfast and knowing there was something lurking in my stomach, resenting me, wishing to take the reins. It was still there, but after my run-in with the lady in the blue kaftan, it's as if I knew for a certain that it wouldn't kill me. That, and it wouldn't be an infection risk to others. That didn't mean it was gone, though. Getting back on patrol with Nick, he was the first to notice that I was behaving differently. We had stopped for our bi-weekly gas station hot dog, and I got myself a pre-packaged sushi instead. There was something about less processed and more raw food that just made my stomach rumble with delight. Nick made the observation, acknowledged it, and let it go. He trusted me enough to tell him if something was up. We were having a proper Minnesota summer, meaning rain when you least need it. The Duck had pulled back on their resources, leaving Tomscog PD to focus on setting up a more permanent station. According to Nick, there had been talks about the Yearwalker getting himself killed or leaving the state, which meant peace and quiet, and the potential for something worse down the line. The whole reason for keeping the Yearwalker from getting killed was strictly because of a devil-you-know kind of deal. Someone else taking up that mantle could mean trouble. But in our everyday life, Yearwalkers and the Duck were the farthest thing from our minds. Instead, we picked up drunk teenagers, stopped speeding cars, or scolded shoplifters. Nick and I were even invited to speak about being in law enforcement at a local school. It surprised me how much Nick changed when he had an audience of kids. He blossomed up there. He was smiling ear to ear, engaging with the audience, and there was a sort of enthusiasm there that I hadn't seen before. Asking him about it, he had no idea what I was talking about. He shrugged it off as just getting along well with children. One day, we checked the Northwest Trail around Frog Lake. It was an off-foot kind of path, so we used it as an excuse to take a longer walk. Nick wasn't happy about it, but it was better than being cooked alive in a poorly ventilated patrol vehicle. It was probably the hottest day of the year. We were coming around the bend where the northern road curved back south. The left-hand side of the road past the lake was covered in pine trees. Walking past it, something stirred in me, just a twitch. I stopped to look around. Off in the distance between the trees, I could see a man. He was about 6'5", bald and dressed from top to bottom in a pitch-black trench coat. It looked so out of place that I couldn't believe what I was seeing at first. I poked Nick and pointed the man out. "Yeah, no, that ain't right," Nick said. "Should I shoot him?" "We can't just shoot people, Nick." "Then why the hell do I carry this badge around?" He took a couple of steps forward and whistled to get the man's attention. There was no reaction. We gave each other a questioning look as we spread out a little, covering 2 angles. Without turning away from us, the man backed off. Going further into the woods, there was a short section where we couldn't see him. I hurried forward, yelling at him to stop, but once we got a bit closer, he was already gone. But that stirring feeling in my stomach, that was still there. Nick caught up to me. "We ought to tell the sheriff about this one," Nick huffed. "Guy looks like a weirdo." "He was something all right," I agreed, "but I don't know what." "Why are you saying what and not who?" "I don't know," I shrugged. "Feels like a what." And getting back to our makeshift station at the old fire department building, we went upstairs to have a chat with Sheriff Mason. He was already talking to someone, but they weren't very secretive, so we figured it was fine to approach. The sheriff turned to us with a plastered smile. His guest didn't make an effort to step away, giving me the impression that this was somebody in the know. It was a man in his early 50s. He had a faded blue shirt, a black tie, and black jeans. But I think what stood out to me the most was his pocket protector. People still use those. "Hank, these are 2 of my patrolling officers," the sheriff said. "Hank Dudley," said the man, offering a hand to us. "Hatchet Pharmaceuticals." "I think I'm wearing socks from you guys," Nick said with a grin. "Nice to meet you." We took turns shaking hands. "You had something to discuss?" the sheriff asked. "Yeah, we just wanted to bring something up," I said. But, "Oh, don't mind Hank, he's good people," the sheriff said. "Let's hear it." I told them about our patrol around the lake, and the man with the trench coat, and how he seemingly disappeared. It just gave me a bad feeling, I admitted. I don't know why. Hank gave me a curious look as if making a mental note. The sheriff pondered his options for a bit, leaving the floor open for others to chime in. "I think I know what that is," Hank smiled. "And if it is what I think it is, we really need to be on the lookout. Sheriff." "Agreed," Sheriff Mason said. "Ought to make sure we're all vigilant. I've heard of this thing, but it usually sticks to its home." As the sheriff walked away and Nick went to get a coffee, I was left alone with Hank for a bit. He adjusted his tie and square-shaped glasses. "Miss, what did you feel when you first saw this man?" Like a general worry, I guess. Nothing out of the ordinary." "You feel that way a lot?" "Not really, no." He quieted down, giving a once-over to make sure that nobody was close enough to listen in. "And did you by chance know Adam Salinger?" I was going to deny it, but my reaction had already given away my honest answer. I sort of half-gasped and turned it into a smile. "Yeah, Adam," I nodded. "Didn't know his last name." Hank nodded as Nick returned with the coffee. There was something about Hank's look that just screamed at me to run for the hills. We were law enforcement, yes, but this was one of the hatchet men, and in corporate America, people like him make the laws. "If you see that trench coat man again, I suggest you call it in," Hank said. "I don't think it'd be a good idea to confront him." "We'll keep that in mind," said Nick. "There's coffee in the break room if you want." I shook my head. That stuff tasted like a tire fire. The sheriff made an official order later. If we saw the strange man again, he was to be taken in for questioning. Patrols were actively encouraged to seek him out, and upon encountering him, call for backup, and await further instruction. We were given a couple of recommendations. One was to not be stingy with tasers, and another to not engage even if the suspect looked unconscious. And there was also a mention that a strong spearmint spray could be used as a repellent. Yeah, that last one gave me pause too. Clearly, they knew more than they were letting on, but it was useless to push for more. The sheriff was still seen walking around with Hank at his side, and the two of them seemed to have come to some sort of understanding, and they weren't letting anyone in on their secrets. Over the weeks that followed, there was this sort of cat and mouse deal with the trenchcoat man. Patrols would report seeing him around the high school at night, and there were people calling in saying that they had seen him standing on rooftops. This wasn't just a one-time thing, it was reoccurring, and in proximity to ordinary people. But no one had been hurt, yet. We saw him a couple of times too, but only in the distance. Once when cruising down the highway. It was just in passing, but he was there. When we stopped and doubled back, he was already gone. Another time was when we came out of a pub downtown, and we were taking in a woman for public intox and disorderly conduct when I saw the trenchcoat man on a roof across the street. As soon as he saw that we had noticed him, he fled. But what bothered me the most was my unease. Every time he was near, something stirred in me. A tickle of something unpleasant. And sometimes I would feel it even when I didn't see him, as if he was close by but just out of sight. It was late July when I got a call from Nick. I had been at home for about 2 hours, relaxing after work, so I had already kicked my shoes off and had dinner.
He's here,
Nick said. No hello, no anything, just that. I sprung out of my couch. Right now? I asked.
Yeah, right now. He's right outside. I think he's looking for a way in.
I rushed to my car, grabbing only my gun and tool belt. Nick called down to the station while I rushed over. It was one thing for the stranger to stalk us from a distance, but we weren't taking chances when it came to home intrusion. If somebody had watched us for this long, they knew that we were armed and dangerous. If they still wanted to pursue us, something was wrong. By the time I got to Nick's, I saw somebody circling the right side of the building, peeking through the windows. I slammed my foot on the brakes, put the car in park, and I got out with my gun drawn. "Police, hands on your head," I screamed. "Get on your knees now." I was about 30 feet away, but I got a good eye. That uneasy stir in my stomach was going haywire, and I had to bite down not to have anything escape my throat. The man in the trench coat turned away from me and unfurled his jacket. Except it wasn't a jacket. It looked almost organic. It started to vibrate like the wings of a cockroach. Seconds later, he was gone, flown off into the night. My brain couldn't register what had happened fast enough. I could still hear the buzzing in the distance. And then I heard it again, this time from the other side of the building. There were 2 of them. And by the time I got to Nick, they were gone. He had locked himself in the bathroom, the only room without a window. I assured him that they were gone, and Nick got out with this pallid gray color on his face, like he had seen a ghost. Those weren't people," he wheezed. I don't know what." Yeah, I nodded. "Me neither, Nick." "You see the size of that thing?" He was still clutching his gun as he ran his fingers over his balding head. I put a hand on his shoulder, getting him to lower the gun. He snapped to attention, turning the safety back on and holstered it. "What the hell did they want?" he asked. I didn't have an answer, but I could still feel something was wrong, and that couldn't mean anything good. June had rolled into July at this point. More people were passing through Tomskog on a weekly basis as vacations began. Tomskog wasn't the kind of place for people to come visit, but a lot of folks passed through on their way south from St. Cloud, and at the very least, they stopped for gas. That meant we were getting more traffic than usual, and with traffic came traffic trouble. Instead of having a couple of stops a week, we went to having a couple of stops per day. We were also getting a lot more calls. People fishing without a license, underage drinking, all kinds of stuff. But through it all, I could see Nick deteriorate. He was clearly worried, and he often told me how he thought he might have seen or heard something. Whatever was out there was clearly not leaving him alone. One morning, Nick didn't show up for work. I was asked to go check on him. Coming to his house, I could see that there was a good reason to be worried. The front door had been broken and there were smashed windows. I called it into dispatch and requested another patrol. I approached and called out to him, but I got no answer. The kitchen was a mess. The fridge was wide open and beeping incessantly. I eventually found Nick curled up in a closet, the one place that nobody had looked. I thought he was going to shoot me when I opened those doors, but he kept his cool. I helped him up, feeling a shiver coming down his arm. He leaned back against the wall as he caught his breath and wiped his forehead. "There's way more than two," he said. "Way more." That day, we were out in full force. Patrols were knocking on doors, asking people if they had seen anything. Officers were posted on rooftops. Charlie and Reggie on dispatch were keeping a map of the town at the station, marking the spot of every collective sighting. We were trying to find a pattern, something that we could use to get a location. We ended up with 4 possible sites to investigate further. The high school, an old scrapyard, a small house by the walking trail, and a house on the outskirts of town. All sites were to be investigated. Nick and I were to check out the lone house outside of town. We drove out there just after lunch. Nick was still shaken up about the whole thing, but he was handling it well enough. He wasn't his usual sarcastic self though. It was a 2-story house, abandoned by the looks of it. All the windows were broken and the paint was peeling off the walls. There was a messy yard with all kinds of scrap and broken tools scattered. A couple of empty planters lined the walkway to the front door. You could see the edge of an old greenhouse in the backyard. It must have been abandoned for some time, as the plastic that covered it had been suntanned by now. If you looked close enough, you could see a handful of dry blue sunflowers struggling along the tree line. "Someone lives here?" I asked. Locals think that it's haunted," Nick said. "It's not like fun haunted, but a people go missing kind of haunted." "People have gone missing out here." "Long ago, yeah. Ought to tear it down then. We can't even fill the potholes. This thing will be here for a century." We walked around the premises, checking the house from every angle. There was that tingle in my stomach again, a warning. I got the feeling that there was something there. I didn't know how to tell Nick, so I just asked him to keep his eyes open. Coming back around the front, I stepped up to the door. There is a strange smell to the place, like a combination of sulfur and ammonia. There were blue footprints on the wooden floor. I stopped to listen, noticing a clicking noise in the distance. There is a long corridor leading through the house. There is a sharp turn to the right about halfway through the corridor leading into the cellar. There was something moving down there. Walking through the corridor, I suddenly stopped. There is a vibration in my stomach, like something telling me to wait. Seconds later, I heard something.
Please leave.
It sounded like 2 people speaking at once in the exact same cadence, but different voices. It was coming from the cellar. "Are you the owner of the property?" I asked.
No, my mother was.
"We're here investigating a reported disturbance."
This does not concern me.
Nick pushed past me, knocking his hand on the wall. "All right, you need to come out," he said. "We need to have a conversation."
I would much rather we didn't.
"I'm giving you a lawful order," Nick said. "You are not the owner of the property, you are trespassing. That and refusing a lawful order would be 2 charges. There was a short pause. Nick kept his hand on his taser just in case.
One moment.
A couple of seconds passed before we heard footsteps coming up from the cellar. Stepping out was the shape of a towering man, tall enough to scrape the top of his head across the ceiling. He had wrapped himself in blankets, showing only part of his feet. He had these strange, black leather shoes with 3 pointed ends. I had never seen that kind before. He was absolutely massive. Nick took his hand off the taser instead, touching his handgun. "And do you have any identification?" Nick asked.
No.
"Do you have a name that we could run?"
Evan.
Nick looked back at me with a raised eyebrow. I shrugged back at him. There was nothing illegal about being a large and strange man, but I couldn't shake this feeling that there was more to him. As Nick looked around the decrepit kitchen and living room, I was left alone with the large man, Evan. I didn't want to say anything, but he seemed curious about me.
Are you ill?
He asked. Me?
Yes.
I didn't answer him. I just shook my head, waiting for Nick to finish checking the property.
What are you looking for?
"A strange man in a trench coat," I said. "He's been spotted around this area."
They are not here.
"They?" I asked.
They,
Evan said.
they are not strange men.
"You seem to know a lot about this."
Yes.
Nick joined me in the hallway. The large man adjusted his blankets, hiding his strange shoes. He asked us to join him in the living room. He sat down on an old moldy couch, almost folding himself in half. I had never seen a man sit like that before. The couch groaned and complained as the springs struggled to support his weight. As he made himself comfortable, Nick decided to address the elephant in the room. "Why are you wrapped up like that?"
Molting.
Evan said. "I'm sorry, did you say molting?" Nick asked. "Is that the word you used?"
Yes, officer.
Evan let out a hand from his pile of blankets. A thin, stick-like arm as black as tar with 4 fingers. It could be misconstrued as a strange glove, but it was much too thin for a man of his stature. He asked to borrow a phone and Nick handed over his. He never told Evan the password, but he still managed to unlock it. A couple of confident taps later and Evan brought up a map. He pointed to an area next to the highway outside of town.
They are looking for my friend, he said. They gather here. High ground.
You know how many there are? What they are?
About a dozen. They are hiders.
Hiders?
They are stuck and cannot go home. So they hide and hunt.
A long stick-like finger tapped at the screen.
They will leave. My friend is not here.
We didn't get a lot more out of him. Evan wandered off back into the cellar and we didn't want to push our luck. I was getting chills just being near him, and Nick had been uncharacteristically quiet for some time. The moment the large man retreated downstairs, we got back to our patrol vehicle. Nick was breathing heavily. "You okay?" I asked. "It's dumb," he said. "I'm fine." "What is it?" Nick rolled his eyes, pointing back at the old house. "He smells like And going back to the station, we told the sheriff about the guy that we had met and the conversation that we had had. It seemed to make sense to him, and the rest of the search was called off. Nick was to sleep at the station for now. If these things hunted him for food or whatever they were doing, there was no safer place to be. Then we just had to wait and hope that they would leave willingly. A couple of days would pass, and during an evening shift, we got a call about a serious car crash. The details were gruesome. One man was not only dead, but decapitated. One child, seemingly unharmed, was to be taken in by the CPS. We only got the information third hand and weren't the first responders on site. We could tell that it was important though. Even the sheriff was up in arms about it. The kid was apparently named Fred. Patrols were asked to check the nearby area to make sure that there was no one else hurt. The road was just covered with woodland in all directions, so if somebody else had survived the crash, they could be anywhere. Nick and I checked the adjoining southern roads, only dirt paths leading westward. They were rarely used, but if somebody had run south from the crash site, that's where they would end up. Driving out there as the sun was setting, I felt this constant sense of unease. My stomach was flaring up over and over, to the point where I was digging my fingers into the steering wheel. Nick must have noticed my white-knuckle driving and turned on the radio. "What's up with you?" he asked. "I don't know, it feels off." "All right," he said, adjusting his sunglasses. "You got any idea why?" It feels like a warning, like something's up." "I don't see anything," Nick said, looking out the window. "But I trust you." "You do?" "I mean, yeah," he shrugged. "Don't see a reason not to." Nick shone a light out the passenger side window as we slowly cruised down the dirt path. Suddenly, he tapped me on the shoulder. Stop, stop, stop," he said, "right there." I stepped on the brakes and he was out in a second. Putting the car in park, I rushed after him. We jogged a couple of seconds only to see a man passed out in a ditch. He must have taken a tumble down a nearby hill, scratching himself in the underbrush. In getting a closer look, Nick gasped. It was the younger Digman kid, Perry. He was in his 20s but had the face of a teenager. But as we saw him, he might as well have been 50. He looked awful. It was clear he had been in an accident and he was bleeding from various cuts and bruises. His breathing was steady, but his shortness of breath told another story. He must have collapsed from exhaustion and blood loss. We did a couple of basic checks. There was no need for CPR, so we figured we'd just call it in. But as soon as Nick put his hand on the radio, I stopped him. It wasn't a conscious decision, but that second of silence had saved us. "What are you? Listen." There were movements in the trees around us. Clicking, buzzing, a strange barking noise like a large excited dog, only wrong somehow. "Don't make a sound," I whispered. "Not a sound." Nick clicked off his radio. We turned off our flashlights. We looked at the tree line, listening for movement. Something jumped from one pine tree to another. Something buzzed overhead. And then something collapsed on top of our patrol vehicle. The thing must have weighed over 600 pounds. Over 7 feet tall, this thing was a whirlwind of elongated limbs, tendrils, and exoskeleton. It bent the roof of the patrol vehicle inward as a long arm reached inside. My first thought was that it could smell us. Another joined in. They literally tore our car apart, flipping it on its side. The passenger seat was tossed across the road like it was a wet paper napkin. With strength like that, they could rip a human arm out of its socket in a heartbeat. We barely saw them in the dark. In the shadow of the patrol vehicle, they were just silhouettes, like moss crawling on a dying light bulb. With the car demolished, they spread out. The barking noise was some kind of thing that they used to smell. I figured it was only a matter of time before they found us, but there was nothing that we could do. Running would be useless, these things could fly. "We can split up," Nick suggested with a whisper. "Trick 'em. And leave the kid," I whispered back. Something brushed against a tree no more than 20 feet away. A twig snapped. "I've seen these," Nick whispered. "Back in Juniper, but smaller." I hushed him and he hushed me back. "Listen, they could smell sore. The thing you got, it's like catnip." So that's it," he said. "We spend time together. I smell like you, so they follow us." It made sense. I had lived with Nick during the time that we stayed up for 72 hours. If they were drawn to sore-infected people, they would tear that place apart looking for him and me. It also explained my regular unease. They had been spying on my place too. They must have noticed that harassing Nick caused me to come out to check on him, allowing them to spy on the both of us at the same time. They were clever. "So it is me," I whispered. Probably. You sure?" "No." It was good enough for me. I got out of the ditch and turned on my flashlight. I turned my radio back on, turned off the safety on my handgun, and I took aim. The dispatch, I found a victim of the single vehicle collision off 24th. We're on. Nick tucked his arms under the unconscious Digman kid, dragging him away. The shadows gathered around me. Leather-like skin reflected off my flashlight as they ducked and weaved to surround me. I took a shot at one of them, causing it to buzz away with enormous force, kicking up a dust cloud as gravel spattered across the hood of our broken car. A dirt road south westbound, heading towards the old scrapyard. "We require immediate medical assistance and additional units. Over." Releasing the radio, I spun around. Things in every direction. It felt like trying to push away water while standing in a lake. Something shot out in front of me, a tendril wrapping itself around my neck as a pink, beak-like mouth opened in front of me like a blossoming flower. Rows of teeth intermingled with black dot-like eyes, with numerous tendril-like tongues eagerly twitching my way. A claw raked my arm, ripping away my handgun. I yelped as the pain registered, and as I did, white strands shot out of my mouth. They burned the tendril, forcing it to let me go. I spat at the ground, taking my flashlight in my mouth as I picked up my gun with my left hand. This wasn't over. Not yet. They clicked and buzzed and barked. They were excited. The smell was exhilarating to them. In the distance, I could see Nick leaving the Digman kid on the road and doubling back to help me. I spat out my flashlight. "Stay back," I yelled at Nick. "Go!" Of course, Nick didn't listen. He unloaded an entire mag on these things. They were taking some real damage, leaping away from me, but there were just too many. As our ammunition ran dry, the circle closed around me. A couple of them broke away to deal with Nick. I remember throwing my handgun at them. I wasn't going to go down without a fight, no matter how much it hurt. I felt so helpless, limbs reaching out of the dark to pull me away. A hulking monstrosity looming over my friend Nick just further down the road. They would all get what they were looking for, and there was nothing that I could do. Predator and prey, the most primal instinctive fear. The dawning realization that you are outmatched, and that the tools you've been given were not meant for fighting but for fleeing. A talon grabbed my neck, pushing me to the ground. Scratches against my back as if trying to understand if my clothes were skin or shell. Barking as hot air tickled my bleeding arm. They sniffed me. Something big bent down, and seconds later there was this immense pain coming from the back of my head. It tore out a thumb-sized chunk of my hair, eating it and savoring it. And then they stopped. Maybe they had just listened, but they stopped. There was a whistling noise and then another click. Movement. Fast movement. One of them was right in front of me. In less than a second, it was flung into the air, brought down, and it had its head torn from its shoulders. They immediately scattered, but not fast enough. Something large, dressed in what looked like a sun-tanned plastic cover like a makeshift raincoat, tore through them like a rabid animal. It was like watching a hornet take on a colony of termites. It was fast, brutal, and absolutely visceral. These things screamed like stuck pigs as wings were torn, mandibles broken, thoraxes caved in, and viscera spilled. I saw one of them trying to crawl, only to be cut into 2 pieces and kicked off the road. And then as soon as it had begun, it stopped. My flashlight had been crushed in the struggle, so I only saw the vague outline of a multi-limbed thing leaning over me. There was a flash of something metallic, perhaps a machete or a spade, maybe several. "Up." It was a strange but familiar voice. "Evan." I got up, feeling my scalp burn.
"Get him out,"
Evan said.
"I will hunt."
What the hell? I could barely form a coherent thought. Something wet patted me on the shoulder, leaving a viscera-stained mark. Good luck. And with that, he was gone. Every now and then, I would hear screaming out in the wilds, but it was distant and far between. By the time that I joined Nick, the kid was waking up. Nick forced me to sit down and take it easy. Reinforcements would be there momentarily. He checked the kid out. You know your name? He asked. Your date of birth? The kid couldn't focus. His head kept rolling back and forth. It was hard to tell if he was concussed, anemic, or dehydrated. Maybe all three. I'm Perry, he finally said. All right, good, we're getting somewhere. You know what happened tonight? I'm walking, he muttered. I'm walking all year. It didn't take long for more patrol vehicles to arrive. EMTs took the kid in, and we were expected to debrief with the sheriff, but only Nick was asked to go. I had to stay behind, watching the many flashing lights fill the road. It took 4 guys to flip our car back, and when they did, it collapsed. 2 doors fell off in one of the wheels. Those things had mangled it beyond recognition. I got it from here. Hank Dudley was the last person that I expected to see there. Hatchet Pharmaceuticals had nothing to do out here, but here he was. He had put on a white jacket with a blue sunflower logo and kneeled down in front of me. You had a really rough night, huh? Yeah, I said. I did. I'm gonna have the EMTs check you out, but then you're coming with me. Excuse me? It's not a question, miss. It's what's gonna happen. I just looked at him baffled. He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He gave me a comforting smile. Miss, we've had your house, phone, car, wallet, and radio bugged for weeks. You don't think we know what's going on? You what? You got a somehow stable sore infection. You got it from Adam Salinger. That's very important to us. I'm not working with you, I'm an officer of the law. No, you're expendable, Hank said, and it's already settled. He leaned in closer, looking me in the eye, and his smile faded. You really thought you could hide this from us? He asked. What was your plan? You can't do shit, I said. Miss, I already have. It's done, and you're going away. He put a hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged it off. So instead, he grabbed the collar of my shirt. I could shoot you and have you dissected, he continued, but I much prefer to hear you cry. I slapped him. Didn't matter that I was bleeding from my arm. I slapped him anyway. He got up and backed away, laughing at the top of his lungs. I'll give you that one, he laughed. Sorry, I got cocky. He looked to his sides. Men with white shirts, black ties, and blue sunflower logos. Take her in. I got a black hood wrapped around my head, zip strips across my wrists. I kicked and squirmed, but it was useless. Somewhere off in the background, I could hear Nick screaming frantically at them to let me go, but it was too late. I was dragged off and put into a soundproof vehicle, and I'd be gone for a long time. I wish I could give you more detail. I wish I could give myself more detail. But what happened was that they draped a black hood over my head, and that was that. I was to be taken somewhere and nobody would tell me anything. And why would they? I didn't need to know where I was taken or why. They had their own agenda. There was a bumpy car ride, the sound of sliding metal and an elevator. Firm hands gripped my arms to the point where they bruised. Apart from the occasional go, there were no words. The elevator had gone down, so I guessed I was somewhere underground. When the hood came off, I was in a brightly lit concrete room. There was a simple bed, a toilet, a sink, and a metal door. There were no indicators as to where I was. No clocks and no phones. The only thing to keep my mind busy were a couple of magazines next to the sink. They were mostly about things like fishing and camping, from the turn of the millennium. Time passes differently in a place like that. You start to imagine things and you lose track of yourself. From the point where you go to sleep to when you wake up, everything looks the same. It's like no time has passed at all. You start to doubt yourself. Did you sleep for 6 hours or 10 minutes? Has it been 5 minutes since your last drink of water or 2 hours? At times, there would be commotion outside, people grunting and struggling with something. They would swear or scream. You got used to it after a while. It must have been 3 or 4 days before I got to see another person. By that time, I had read through every magazine dozens of times, counting how many times each letter showed up. I had counted every ceramic tile on the floor, the walls, the ceiling. I was desperate. It was a stranger that opened the door. She looked nice enough. A tall woman in her 50s with combed back hair, like she was fresh out of the shower. "You're not gonna cause me trouble, are you?" she asked. "Well, should I?" "I wouldn't advise it. I'm just here to check on you." I didn't fight her. There were plenty of guards outside. I would just put myself in a world of pain. Instead, as she checked my pulse, shone a light in my eyes and asked to check my throat. She had these thick gloves and a pair of protective goggles, possibly to make sure that I wouldn't accidentally infect her with sore. "I can't believe that it's stable," she said. "I've never seen that." "But you've seen it unstable." "Oh, several times. This type of affliction is more common than you think." She put together a couple of pills in a small cup and handed it to me. I didn't take them. "It's just vitamins," she said. "See?" She downed one of them without a drink of water, like a lunatic. I decided that for now I would trust her. She seemed harmless enough. As she was about to leave, I panicked a little. I didn't want to be stuck in that room for more time than necessary, and I was practically climbing the walls at that point. I followed her to the door and watched the guard outside tense up with his taser. "Please," I said. "I'm going crazy in here." "Sorry about that," she sighed. "Most people in your condition aren't as mentally stimulated." "Are there others like me down here?" "Oh, a handful," she said. "Most of them just sit there or stand in the corner. So I suppose none of them are really like you." "Miss, I'll go crazy in here. You gotta do something. I'm not like them." She looked me up and down. There was a sort of sympathy there for sure. She was hesitant. "Dudley brought you in, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I nodded. "I don't even know what you want from me." "Well, we're gonna do some tests. We're going to see what the difference between you and the other infected are." "Well, for how long? What's gonna happen to me?" She opened her mouth to say something, but changed her mind. She gave me a pat on the shoulder. "You have to understand," she said. "Most people who come here don't leave. They can't. You're something new, and I don't think anyone has figured out how to deal with that yet." "Hey, listen, I'll play ball," I said. "Just don't stick me in here like an animal." Fair enough. I agreed to do some preliminary tests. I was taken to an examination room where the lady collected basic samples: blood, saliva, urine. She also checked my ears and feet. It wasn't all that uncommon for those infected by sore to have very dark nails, apparently. She already knew my name, but she introduced herself as Allie. She had been with Hatchet for over 12 years, and before that she had been a professor at UC Berkeley. I didn't have to tell her a lot about myself. She had read the files. "What I don't understand is how all this happened in the first place," she said. "Sore doesn't just stop on its own. You must have done something." "I met this woman out by St. Gall," I said. "Had a blue caftan. After speaking to her, I was just fine." "Oh, I'd love to meet her," Allie said. "But I suspect that whoever that was wouldn't be all too eager to work with us." I had a couple of x-rays taken, and then she emerged with a massive syringe. Seeing my reaction, she put it away. "We'll take the bone marrow some other day," she said. "But I'm afraid that's all for today." Please don't put me back in there, I said. It messes with my head. How about this? I asked the guards to turn the lights off at 9 p.m. and I get you a couple of books to read. Would that help? I shrugged. It would help, but it still wasn't an enticing thought. And we'll talk again tomorrow, she added. Deal? Sure, yeah, deal. For the next few days, Allie tried to make sure that I was comfortable as possible. Lights out at night, books to read, and she came by at least once per day. Mostly just to get a couple of samples or to talk about the results. For example, the iron value in my blood was a lot lower than it ought to be, so I had to take some extra pills for that. And days would pass, maybe weeks, and the only people that I would see were Allie and the guards, and Allie was the only one talking to me. And we developed a sort of quasi-friendship, where she would get me out of my cell and I would provide her with answers. And sometimes we would just sit and talk for a while. She would tell me about her sons back in California, about her messy divorce a year or so back. It was nice to hear something so ordinary. And then there was that one day when she wanted to show me why they were doing this to begin with, to give some context. We wandered around the other cells. There were about a half a dozen in total. There were more rooms, but most were empty. We can't go in without full hazard gear, she said. They may look calm, but if we provoke them, it can set them off. She walked up to a door and opened a small hatch, protected with plexiglass. There was a middle-aged man in there lying on his bed. There was something coming out of his mouth. Little white strands. That looks harmless enough, I said. Is it really that bad? Allie knocked on the door once. The man shot out of bed and threw himself at the door with reckless abandon. He had this long wound across his neck where more white strands protruded, and now that he was provoked, I could see more coming out of his nose, ears, and eyes, just like what had happened to me. As some people change more and some less, she explained. Long before my time, they tried experimenting with specific dosages in volunteers to see if the transformation could be steered. Well, could it? And not really, she sighed. But boy, could it do some terrible things. The man pressed his face against the plexiglass. The white strands poked and prodded at the edges, trying to find a way through. Allie didn't back down. And most people already have a minuscule amount of the catalyst in their system, she explained, sort of like microplastics. What is it? I asked. I think the layman's term for it is blameless. A stupid name, but it seems pretty ingrained by now. But there was a Danish-American philosopher that had another name for it. She closed the hatch and looked me straight in the eye, maybe just for a factor to drive a point home. He called it the soul, she said. He claimed that this material was what gave our ancestors that first ability to speak, to think, and to reason. I was shown a handful of other patients. I didn't think all that much of it until I saw a young woman. She had this black, pixie-cut hair. I just blurted out my thoughts. I had gotten so used to talking to Allie that I didn't consider what I was saying. Elizabeth, I said. Salinger, right? You two know each other. In a way, I know her dad. Oh, he's been looking for her, she said. It's horrible, really. She had a very gruesome infection. Allie looked through the hatch. Elizabeth was just standing there, drooling on the floor. There are certain creatures that feed on this catalyst, she explained, but most people have very little of it. So what they do is they plant like a seed, and over time it blossoms into, well, this. She pointed at the hatch. Once we're well and ripe, they usually come back to harvest us, like wheat. When you say creature, you mean? Allie closed the hatch and turned to me. She leaned back against the door with her arms folded. I mean creatures, unnatural things, things that slip between the cracks from other places and end up here. Things from places that you and I can't even imagine. Being taken back to my cell, I pondered this revelation. I wasn't inclined to believe the word of a Danish-American philosopher, but I had read about similar theories. Stoned ape theory, for example. There was a lot of talk about the evolution of man being instigated by a third party. Most of it was pseudo-scientific nonsense, though. Not that I read a lot of articles back then. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a noise. The guards were all back in their break room, so it couldn't be them. I listened closely, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I ended up leaning against the door. There was a voice on the other side.
Can you hear me?
It said. Barely.
I'm using the keypad, it said. It has a microphone. The volume don't go louder than this.
You're talking through a keypad.
If it's powered, I can use it.
The voice said.
Are you the cop? The one they brought in?
Yeah, I said. Who is this?
I'm someone who can get you out of this place. That sound interesting to you?
I'm listening. The voice explained that it was trying to gather some information about the facility and that with my help, it could probably break a couple of locks. We would start with something small just to try it out.
There's a lamp in your room. It's turned off, but it's still connected. I'm gonna cycle through these and you will tell me if it comes back on.
Sure. A couple of seconds later, the lamp blinked. Got it, I said. It's blinking.
Good. That means I can isolate your floor. Hold on.
There was a short pause and then a click. The door was open.
Just check it. Don't go out.
It was indeed unlocked. I peeked out at the empty hallway.
Yeah, we got some work to do, but I can get you out.
Why would you want to? I asked. Who is this?
I'm John Digman, and I need to get my nephew out of there.
From that point on, I would spend my day with Allie and the evening with John. We would speak through the keypad through the door. He would ask me to perform little tests. At one point, I was even asked to go into the hallway to check if we could get other doors unlocked. Turns out that we could. I was a bit hesitant about unlocking the door for the middle-aged man, but luckily he didn't hear it. But at that one moment when the lock clicked, I expected him to jump out of his bed and storm the door. I had never actually interacted with John Digman directly like this before. His capabilities were downright frightening. He was getting enough influence to completely control the floor, but if that's what it took for me to get out, hell, he could have it. He was an uncomfortable person to talk to say the least. There was something robotic about his voice and demeanor, and beyond it coming from the keypad. Still, I could understand the urgency. If his nephew was also stuck down here, he'd be eager to get him out. I remember one night when I lay awake and John was tampering with the HVAC system. I spoke out loud to the keypad. Your nephew is Perry Digman, right? I asked.
Yes.
We pulled him out of a ditch, you know. He was in bad shape.
I know. That's why I'm talking to you.
So this is my reward for helping you people.
In a way.
He sighed.
But you're also new enough not to be burdened with preconceptions.
Well, that's a nice way of calling somebody inexperienced.
That's not a bad thing.
There was a click at the door, another flicker of the light, and then a deep sigh from the keypad.
All right. I think we're ready. We act tomorrow during the guard change.
And how exactly do I get out of here? And won't they just grab me and put me back here?
There are no records of you ever being there. And when I'm done, they'll have bigger problems than you.
What are you going to do? There was no response. I waited for a full minute before I asked him again.
Tomorrow,
He said, ignoring the question.
guard change.
I was awfully anxious the next day. Allie came by to check on me again. We had been doing some more intricate tests for the past few days, and she had shown me the result of my x-ray. There really was something inside me, a large sprawl of thin lines emanating from a growth around my stomach lining. It was so prevalent on the x-ray that it was hard to differentiate from my nerves. It had spread all throughout my body. I couldn't help but to notice the little blue sunflower logo on that x-ray, a reminder that I was still under Hatchet's boot. "I can't believe you're not suffering any severe effects from it," Allie said. "Most people go through stages of pain, desperation, and then succumb to the infection." "Yeah, I barely notice it," I said. "Sometimes when I get stressed, I can feel it in my throat though." "You know, you might have a key to something amazing here," Allie said. "It's gonna take time, but I think what happened to you can be used to help others." "You really think so?" Allie bent down to look through a blood sample on a microscope. She trusted me enough to not even look at me. I could easily pick up a scalpel from a nearby table and kill her, but she knew that I wouldn't. "I really do," she said. "I really, really do." I wasn't sure what to do. Having talked to John, I got the impression that things were going to go down no matter what I said or did. What exactly he was going to do, well, I didn't know. Maybe I didn't want to know. That night, as the lights in my cell went off, I was wide awake. I was ready to go at a moment's notice. I didn't know what to make of John Digman, but he had proven time and time again to be more than capable. If he wanted to get someone out, he could. But exactly how, well, that part worried me. I was pacing back and forth in my room, not knowing what to expect. I felt a bit bad about Allie, truth be told. She had done her best to make my time there bearable. I had to remind myself that she and everybody else there were, for all intents and purposes, the enemy. It must have been near midnight when I heard that first noise. It came out of nowhere, an alarm spoken by a monotone digital voice.
Pressure alert.
It repeated over and over.
Pressure alert.
There were a series of popping sounds going down the hall. The lights turned on and off before shutting down completely. After a couple of seconds in the dark, a faint red glow emanated from the floor as the emergency lights came on. And then the door swung open. There were voices in the hallway, someone demanding a person to stop, somebody screaming at the top of their lungs, and somebody running down the hall as if chased by the devil. "John?" I said. "John, are you there?" There was no response. No matter how many times I asked, there was still nothing. And this was it. He was throwing the facility into chaos, and that was that. He never had the intention to help me specifically. I would have to make it out on my own. Walking out into the hallway, I could barely see a thing. There were pipes overhead that had burst wide open, spewing out steam into a thick mist. I could barely see anything. It all just looked like a blood-red fog. I stuck to the wall and tried to make it to the elevator. At times, I would hear somebody running nearby, but I couldn't see them. The thought hit me that all the people from the adjacent rooms were on the loose, running wild. There was no telling what they might do. Maybe the sore infected would ignore me. I made it to a corner. I had my suspicions about where the elevator might be, so I continued to the right. I almost slipped in a small pool of still warm blood. I swallowed my unease and kept going, trying not to imagine what might have happened. A couple of feet later, there was a bloody handprint on the wall. By the angle of it, I got the impression that somebody had been dragged down the hallway. I almost missed the elevator. It was hard to see anything, and the elevator doors were painted to blend in with the wall. There was a numbered keypad, but I didn't know the code. I hoped against hope that Digman had disabled it, but after a couple of clicks, it was evident that he hadn't. "You don't want to use that." It was Allie. She had armed herself with a handgun. For a moment, I thought that she might use it on me, but instead she kept it at her side and kept looking around. "They got orders to shoot anything that goes up," she explained. "So if something happens, you're all just dead. We use the service tunnels in case of emergency. Okay, so let's do that. Let's use the service tunnels. Allie didn't know what to say. She stepped a little closer and lowered her voice. There's more than 6 subjects at the facility, she said. Way more. Well, how many? We're talking close to 100. We were going to have to get to the basement level and exit through the service tunnel, wading through close to 100 sore infected people. Allie needed hazard gear to make sure that she wasn't infected, but there were people standing outside the laboratory. There was no way to get past them without a fight, and so we settled to move the other way. We could check the other floors. There was a silent agreement. I would help her and she would help me. We were on different sides of this deal, but we both understood what was at stake. I even sympathized with her a bit. Under different circumstances, we could have worked together. But being kidnapped and dragged to an unknown location by Hank Dudley was just something that I couldn't accept. Still, I couldn't help but feel a gnawing guilt about this. If I hadn't helped John Digman, none of this would have happened. Then again, it was on them too. If they hadn't taken me in, they would have been fine. We made it to the staircase and continued down. I couldn't see the bottom floor. I got the impression that even if the lights were fully functioning, it might be deep enough to still not see the bottom. We could hear echoing cries coming from levels below. After a couple of steps, there was a gunshot. Allie clutched her handgun like a teddy bear. You ever used that thing? I asked. Never, she admitted. I have. She stopped and thought about it and then nodded. She used a small key in her keychain to remove a little widget from the trigger and handed the gun to me. I made sure the safety was off. We continued to the next level. We wanted to go check for hazard gear, but there were too many people moving in the fog. It was impossible to tell if there were guards or not at a distance. Allie didn't want to risk it, so we kept going. We took a sharp right out of the staircase and onto one of the lower levels. It seemed to be a kind of administration floor, complete with a couple of cubicles and a conference room. There was no one there. The facility is connected by an underground network of tunnels, she said. They were originally bomb shelters. As long as there's a way out, I said. There should be, but I've never been there. She took a left into an office. Her own office, it seemed. She dug through the drawers of her desk, looking for something. I've got backup gear, she said. I just need the keys to the locker. And then she stopped. She stared at something in the middle of the desk. A black spot. Allie didn't know what to make of it. And then she started shaking her head. No. No. How did they even... There was a click overhead. Sprinklers. It wasn't exactly water. It was more viscous, like thin jelly. It had this awful smell of ammonia and chlorine, and it coated the entire room in it, staining everything. It was the same substance that had covered my skin when I first got infected by Adam Salinger. Allie just looked at her hands, letting the keys slip between her fingers. There was no point in getting that hazmat suit anymore. She was already infected. For a moment, she just stood there as if considering every choice she had ever made that put her in this position. Allie looked at me more confused than scared, as if she couldn't understand it. Come on, I said. Let's go. No, she said. No, it's too late. You don't know that. You don't understand it. You don't come back from it, she said. I'm done. Her fingers curled as she looked up. Her breathing grew forced. It feels comforting, inviting, and she opened her mouth wide, drinking the black water. I grabbed her by the shoulder and dragged her back out into the hall. I pushed her up against an opposing wall, pointing directly at her face. It's not done, I said. We're getting out and you're showing me the way right now. She coughed and something slipped out between her lips. Allie shook her head as if trying to get rid of the intrusive thoughts. She nodded at me. Without another word, we kept going. We continued down another 2 levels until we got to an elevator. This was a lower level elevator not connected to the surface. It was probably meant to exclusively move things between floors rather than transport people in and out of the facility. Maybe it was meant to move subjects without the risk of them getting out. Allie stumbled into the elevator trying to get the keypad to work. She pressed in 2 times but couldn't get it right. "My hands," she said. "I'm shaking too much." "Give me the code." She did, and I pressed it. The elevator rolled downward. The doors opened to a nightmare. It was a large cave-like opening, large enough for trucks to drive through. The ground was covered in the black water, and there were a lot of people out there, easily over 100. Not only subjects, but infected support staff, guards, and maintenance workers. There were even a couple of people with hazmat suits who had taken off the top to drink the black water coming from the sprinklers. Allie stepped back. No one was attacking us yet, but she didn't know what to make of it. Chances were that if we stepped out into that water, she would lose herself completely. "We'll stick to the walls," I whispered. "If we're already infected, they shouldn't attack us, right?" "It's not that simple," Allie said, coughing. "This is a sort of sore super predator. Small harvesters attacking other infected. There could be one out there." "It doesn't look like it," I said, "and we can't stay here." "And to hell with it," she spat. "Let's go." We stuck to the walls as planned. We had to push our way past the infected. They were erratic and spontaneous. The slightest push could set them off. It was impossible to tell what they might do next. It was strange, though. They were all moving in the same direction, as if they knew something instinctively. Could they know of a way out, collectively? I held Allie's hand and dragged her with me, but she was slowing down. After a while, she stopped moving completely. I turned back to look at her, and she just stood there, covered head to toe in black water. White strands rolled out of her mouth. "Come on, Allie, come on," I said. She didn't move. I didn't see anything resembling recognition, or her understanding what I was saying. What remained of her attention had been shattered. Somebody to her right bumped into her, and Allie grabbed them by the neck. A maintenance worker. In a move that can only be described as practiced and intentional, she pulled the man close and pressed her neck against him. Seconds later, she pushed him away, pulling out what looked like a white blood clot. It sloshed onto her chest like a messy toddler's dinner before slurping back into an open hole in her neck. There was an energy in her eyes, a hunger, a level of control that she found in that one act. And with that intention, she locked eyes with me. She was a super predator. I ran like hell, and she followed me. All the while, she grabbed people along the way, tearing out their throats and eating their infection. She was much stronger than a normal person, and I could see her muscles bulge and tense, swelling to almost twice their original size. She didn't have to stop to continue her rampage, and maybe there was something about me that she found irresistible. I took a sharp left turn going into a side tunnel. It was hot as hell. The steam pipes had burst wide open, and there was no ventilation down there. It felt like breathing scalding water. What remained of Allie sprinted with complete abandon, smacking her arms against the hollow pipes as she kept going. She was gaining on me. I rounded a corner, and there was a door to my right. It opened outward so that I could hide behind it. I had an idea, and I hoped to God it would work. I swung the door open and hid behind it. From Allie's angle, it had looked like I had run into that room. If I could trick her, I would gain some time. I heard her coming around the corner, sniffing the air. She could smell me, but she wasn't sure where I had gone. Maybe the steam interfered. She went up to the door, poking her head against it. For a couple of seconds, she just stood there wheezing, like she was breathing through a whistling straw. And then she entered the room. I slammed the door shut, hoping that Allie didn't have the mental faculty to use the handle. Even if she did, I might earn enough time to get away. The moment that door clicked shut, Allie threw herself at it, making the hinges groan. How that thin woman could force that massive pressure under the door was beyond me. Those service tunnels were a labyrinth. There were no indicators of what led where, and you could barely see 10 feet ahead. If Allie didn't get me, the suffocating air would. My lungs ached as I pressed forward, moving randomly from one tunnel to the next. I could barely keep my eyes open, and after a while I just kept them shut. I could feel the scolding pipes on my left, so as long as I kept them to my left, I knew that I was going the right way. And then I tripped. There was a dead man in the way, and I had tripped over him. I hit the ground hard, knocking the air out of my lungs. There was a short moment where my vision blackened as I rolled onto my back and wheezed for air. Looking down the hall where I came from, I could see someone coming around the corner. Allie had figured her way out and was still chasing me. I got a better view of her. She had this beer gut now and her arms seemed longer. I could barely see her face anymore, on account of all the white strands poking out of her head. She was making this howling wail sound like a grieving wolf. It pierced my ears, overpowering even the sound of puffing steam. There was no way that I could get up fast enough to get away. She would find me any second. I had to do something. I rolled over onto my stomach and I held my breath. I heard her coming my way, wailing with every step, and within seconds, she was standing over me. I think the dead body confused her. She couldn't understand if I was living or dead. She bent down and poked the back of my head with her white little strands as if to test me. One of the strands poked a hole in my skin as if to see if I would recoil. I bit down on my lip hard, hoping that she would just go away. I clutched the gun, getting ready. There was a hesitation, but I think she figured she'd give it a try. She rose up, bracing herself, but then stopped. I managed to keep calm enough not to roll over and start firing at her. There were sounds coming from the other end of the corridor, a more immediate target. It was better to chase living prey. She ran down the corridor, huffing with every step. She sounded heavier. I gasped for air and got up off the floor. I figured I might go back and start finding a way out through the main tunnels. There had been trucks there, so there had to be an entrance big enough for them to get through. Then again, being out with the other infected was dangerous. Not only might Allie find me again, but there was a large chance that Hatchet personnel had started to clear the floors by now. A thought struck me. A dumb thought, but a thought nonetheless. Allie might still be acting on some sort of instinctive desire, meaning that she might be looking for a way out. She was still freshly infected. There might be parts of her that still had a want of their own. Either way, the safest place for me would be behind the predator, not in front of it or to its side. So I followed her from afar. It was easy to follow her lead. There were so many bodies along the way, most of them with torn out throats or ripped open chests. I counted at least 13. I wandered around those tunnels for the better part of an hour, maybe 2. And finally, I stumbled upon a checkpoint. It had already been overrun and the doors were flung wide open. There were bloody spots on the numbered keypads, using the same 6-digit code that Allie had shown me. But the final door had been toppled right over. She had not even attempted to open it properly. When I finally made it outside, there was an eeriness to it. One moment I was standing in shrieking steam pipes and blaring alarms and red emergency lights. The next moment I was standing in a pine forest near an overgrown dirt road, from panic to serenity in 5 steps. Somewhere out there I could hear the echo of Allie's wailing cry. It was growing more distant, disappearing into the woods. But I wasn't alone. There were a handful of sore subjects out there wandering off into the woods. Most of them looked harmless enough, mindlessly wandering back and forth. I could see Elizabeth Salinger among them, the young woman with the black pixie haircut. She looked just like the rest of them. My thoughts drifted back to her father Adam. What do you want to see her like this? There was a tinge of regret in me. Maybe I could have helped these people if I had stayed. Maybe this could have all been avoided. I didn't even know who I was supposed to be angry at. Myself, John, or Hank. I heard gunfire in the distance. I was still holding on to Allie's gun. Some part of me had wanted to take her out mercifully, but there was no way to know if a bullet would have stopped her. Checking the magazine, I realized the gun was empty. Of course, Allie had never used it. She had just assumed it was loaded. I made my way into the woods in the opposite direction of Allie's wailing, and I hoped against hope that I would find my way back to civilization one way or another. Hey everyone, I just wanted to tell you all that I started a new podcast on Spotify. Mr. Creep's Scary Stories and Creepypastas. On it, I'll be posting daily stories from across my channels along with previous remastered stories, so you'll have a ton of content to listen to. The perks of having stories on Spotify is the ability to turn off your screen while listening and limited ads on the story. I'll have the link for the podcast in the top of the description. If you could, please go check it out and leave a 5-star review. That really helps with getting the stories out to more people. Thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy today's story. You want to hear about the weirdest thing I ever seen in the ocean? Harvey, the old salt who lived at Neptune's Net, asked me one night. Buy me a sip of Cutty Sark and I'll tell you something only a handful of people have ever heard, and all of them are dead, he said, jabbing his finger for emphasis. His gravelly voice gave the ancient mariner a gravitas you wouldn't expect from a drunk at the end of the bar. I've heard your stories before, Harv, I said, taking a sip of my beer. No thanks. Oh, you heard me lie to tourists, sure, he said, leaning forward on his stool. But after the news I got today, well, I want to tell someone the truth for once. What happened today? The curious bartender asked as she cleaned a mug. Oh, don't feel the need to bring down the room. Just know that it ain't going away, he said, cradling his bottle of Bud. I want to get this story off my soul before Davy Jones comes a call-in. Harv was approaching 65, though he looked 10 years older. Years of working on the water and bending his elbow at beer halls had taken a toll on him. His hair and beard were all salt, no pepper. His green eyes had dulled with age. His pupils bore the telltale milky white growth of cataracts. The well-worn wrinkles of his bronzed face made him look like Jimmy Fox's mitt. His most dominating feature, though, was the ridgeline of white scar tissue that ran from his jaw to his forehead on the left side of his face. I had heard him tell people all kinds of stories, and got it from a knife fight with an orangutan. Pirates in the Red Sea tortured him for fun. A sea demon jumped on deck and sliced him with a sharpened shell. The man told more whoppers than Burger King sold. Despite knowing all this, there was a sincerity in his eyes that I had never seen before. Granted, I wasn't at the bar all the time, but a glance at the bartender let me know that she was experiencing the same thing. She knew Harv, had heard all of his bullshit stories, but she had never seen the man this raw before. A Cutty Sark for Harv, I told her, but she had already poured the drink and handed it over. Much obliged, he said, tipping his cap to me before taking a sip of the scotch. Oh, love that burn, even after all these years. What's on your mind? I asked. He took another sip, letting his thoughts gather steam before he finally spoke. 30 years ago, I worked on a salvage ship called the Bottom Feeder. We ran out of San Diego, but our work took us all over the West Coast. We were a small crew, but we'd worked together for years. A well-oiled team. I loved the guys like they were family, he said, his voice breaking some. He took a sip of the Sark and recovered. Some rich muckety-muck hired us to do a dive, but didn't want his name on the paperwork. Happened a lot in those Wild West days. The industry wasn't regulated like it is now. The bartender and I settled in for this epic. This is what he told us. There were 4 of us on the Bottom Feeder. Me, Paul, Will, and Cappy. Paul and I were the youngest, and both still in our 20s. He was my drinking pal and wingman most nights. When we got paid, we went into port, and good lord, the times we'd have. Cappy, who would have been around my age, would call us a Tweedledee and Tweedledum, but he meant nothing by it. He thought of us as his grandkids. Will was the lead diver and the dad of the group. He was strict but firm. Knew his shit too. Been diving since he took his first steps. If I hadn't met his parents, I would swear that he was Poseidon's kid. Just understood the water and its many lurking dangers better than anyone alive. Anyway, the rich guy wanted us to retrieve some cargo that he had lost when his yacht sank off the coast of Baja California, and told the coasties and insurance that it had gone down in a storm. He was lucky to get away alive. That was the official story anyway. Truth was, the older rich man had married a pretty young wife, and as those relationships go, it broke up quicker than a wooden hull against a rocky shoal. The man, I think his name was Mort or Marty. Son's cooked my memory some. Anyway, the man confided in Cappy that his soon-to-be ex was a vindictive, money-obsessed gal that wanted to take him to the cleaners. To circumvent that, he concocted a plan to put his valuables in watertight barrels and sink them on his boat. I figured the ex wouldn't go looking for them if they were at the bottom of the Pacific. She'd happily take the insurance money and move on with the rest of her life. In case you don't know the score, kid, that's insurance fraud. Claim the things as lost, recover them in secret, and sell them on the black market. It's why the man wanted his name off the paperwork. You can judge us for being shady, and we were, but when they pay in cash up front, you put your morals on the back burner. Landlords don't take virtue as payment. Besides, the salvage world is smaller and more gossip-ridden than a sewing circle. You burn a client, they trash your name, and the work dries up. We weren't about to do that. And Cappy told the man we'd have no problem retrieving his things from the briny depths. Said the only complication would be the weather, but the outlook in the following week looked smooth, so we didn't anticipate any issues. The man told us that if we got his things to him by the week's end, he'd double the rate. Kid, let me tell ya, the best lubricant in the world ain't KY. It's cash on the table. We left that evening. As we neared the dive spot, Paul and I pulled out a bottle of cheap brandy and took turns passing it back and forth. We both hated the taste of it, but it had become a pre-dive tradition, for reasons that we had long forgotten. Will was in the room with us, but instead of imbibing, he was double-checking and triple-checking our gear. What the hell is so valuable you sink a yacht to hide it? Paul asked, taking a nap. I took the bottle from him and drank a drop or 2 or 12. Maybe he killed someone and wanted to hide the body. There's easier ways to hide a body, Will said. I tried handing him the bottle, but he passed. How do you drink that shit before a dive? Puts hair on your chest, I said, cackling. Wife likes me bald, thanks, Will said. Cappy, what about you? Brandy fan. The man entered and lit a smoke. Aye, but not my favorite. More of an in-a-pinch booze, if you ask me. Mind your intake, boys, the waves might get choppy. Can't have you heaving up your breakfast on the deck. What are we bringing up? Paul asked, putting his cap on the bottle and stowing it. Aye, glad you asked, Cappy said, waving us into the pilot room. We followed him like ducklings behind their mother. Laid out on the table in front of us were the blueprints for the yacht that we were heading toward. Cappy pointed at the map. And gentlemen, this is the Allegro, 3-deck pleasure ship that measures 45 meters from toes to nose. 3 decks, sun, main, and lower. Our target is here, he said, pointing at a spacious location on the lower deck. The ballroom. Kinda small for a ballroom, no? I asked. Cappy shrugged. More of an entertaining space, I suppose.
Anyway, the man has 4 waterproof barrels stuffed to the gills with his things. Said he'd like all 4, but it's important we get the container marked as Summer Song. What the hell is Summer Song? Paul asked. It contains a very rare violin. A violin? He sank his boat for a fiddle, Paul retorted. No, he sunk it for a Stradivarius, Will said. There are about 600 of these left in the world. That thing is worth millions, tens of millions, depending on the condition. Way more than his boat. Well, that's why I only play a harmonica, Paul said, pulling it out of his pocket and giving us a quick trip up the scales. I have dozens of them, and you can get them for a few bucks anywhere in the world. And yet you never think to buy a tune, Cappy said with a wink. We all laughed. And Paul quickly blew out an off-key opening to Camptown Races and nodded. Doodah, sir. And now that the concert is over, let's talk logistics. And so we did. It was pretty straightforward. Will and I would be the team to head down into the ballroom. Paul would clear the path from the stairwell to the steel cables. All 3 of us would help attach the barrels, and Cappy would pull them up to the bottom feeder. If there are any complications, we surface and discuss. We don't go cowboy and try to solve the problem under the waves. When oxygen is limited, discussions happen topside. I won't haul out bodies because of someone's pride. Will said, eyeing Paul. Paul blew a cheerful note on his harmonica. I'm not running point on this. I'm golden. No worries for me. You said that the last time, Will said, just reminding everyone before we get into the water. I'm hearing ya, and I'm good. Promise, Paul said. Same, I agreed. I'll keep him in line if I have to. Boys, if anything happens, we can't call the coasties. And this is an unsanctioned salvage mission. The man paid for privacy. If something bad happens, we're on our own. We get caught out here and that's the end of the company. End of our livelihoods, you understand. We did. I can hear the wheels in your head spinning. That's a dumb thing to do, Harv, and it was. But we did it all the time and had never had a bump in the road. Plus, when you're in your 20s, you believe you're invincible. Young bucks don't concern themselves with shotguns until the hunters show up. A day later, we found ourselves at the coordinates, outside the rack on the peninsula's northern side. The seafloor depth in this area is all over the place because of plate tectonics. Some trenches can run 3,000 meters, while others are as shallow as 30. Our man had put down his boat near the more shallow areas, but that didn't mean it stayed there. We wouldn't know until we got into the drink. Jesus, we're looking at 50 meters, Paul said as we geared up. And that's deeper than most religions. Maybe we should say a prayer to Poseidon then. Up our odds some, I countered. Before I could respond, Will joined us. He looked at us both and shook his head. You boys ready for this one? Isn't gonna be a walk in the park. Why'd he put it so deep? Will shrugged. That kind of man who thinks sinking a multi-million-dollar violin in the water is already not making sound decisions. Who knows what he was thinking when he thought up this crazy scheme? And did he really think investigators would come out to the rack looking for the stuff? Maybe. They can be pit bulls if your story sounds suspicious. Plus they probably do a ton of business with them. Take a loss on this yacht to secure the protection on the next. I nodded because there wasn't any more to add. Will was right. Will was often right. While Cappy was the North Star, Will was the sectant that we used to read the skies. I would have followed that man into hell in a gasoline suit if he told me we'd get through to the other side. After we geared up and went topside, we checked our oxygen tanks one last time. They were golden. Cappy was waiting for us in his usual spot, leaning against the gunwale having his traditional pre-dive cigarette. The white smoke curled over his head and was hard to see against the violently blue sky. You boys good to go? He asked, licking his fingers and snuffing at his smoke. We gave him a thumbs up. He nodded. And be safe, be calm, be swift, he said, giving us the sign of the cross
as he blessed us with his own Holy Trinity. We all nodded back at him, muttered an amen to ourselves, and plunged into the water. And the distance we were going was about the limit of recreational scuba dives, but few divers ever go this deep. The farther you get into the blue, the colder and darker it becomes. Around 100 meters, it's impossible to see anything without lights. And we weren't going that deep, but we took lights anyway because diving into the bowels of a sunken ship is equivalent to being in a cave. Without any light, you're as good as dead. Lack of light is one of the many dangers that lurk in the deep. When you're nearly 6 atmospheres down and something catastrophic happens, it's curtains for ya. Best case, your corpse washes up on a beach and the crabs eat you. Your story becomes a cautionary tale to new divers about the dangers of carelessness. Worst case, you're lost to the waves, and no one on shore knows or cares what happened to you. As we dove, the familiar buildup of pressure in my ears and sinuses emerged. I popped them and got immediate relief. The next pressure change that hits your body, and a thing you can't just pop away, is the compression around your lungs. A hug that never ends. We were about 20 meters down when the deeper cold seeped through my suit. Like your lungs, you're aware of the chill, but there isn't anything that you can do. You don't even have to go down far before it's noticeable. Imagine walking into a restaurant's freezer, and you get the idea. While all these issues are concerns at the forefront of your mind, the worst thing that can happen to you is nitrogen narcosis. If you've ever been drunk and tried to order food on the phone, you know what feeling narked is like. Confusion, euphoria, sleepiness, and if you hang in the danger zone long enough, death. If you're narking, you need to get to safer depths as soon as humanly possible. Our job is to ignore these concerns and focus on the task at hand. They never leave your brain, but if you can compartmentalize them, it helps. I've seen beginners flip out underwater and it never ends well. If getting the bends is the best result, I'd wager you can figure out the worst. At about 45 meters, Will pointed down. Like a waving mirage in the desert, the Allegro came into view. It had landed right side up, its bow nestled against a few rocks. Looks like it had just followed the anchor all the way down and settled as if God himself had placed it there. It wasn't hard not to see the divine in the Allegro's landing. About 10 feet from where the ship settled, you could see the jagged black line of a trench. It wasn't bottomless, but from where I was floating, I couldn't see the bottom. Another 10 feet and this thing would have been impossible to find without a submersible. The rich stay lucky. The boat was beautiful, even in the inky depths with schools of silverfish darting through it. White with blue trim and a sun deck made for day drinking and bad decisions with loose women. Random electric cables rose from its body like a sea anemone's stinging arms. As we approached, I prayed we were clownfish, immune to its dangerous touch. I looked over at Will, who nodded at the wreck and gave us a thumbs down. He wasn't judging the boat though. In the water, hand signals are among the few ways to relay messages between divers. Thumbs down meant to go lower, in this case into the boat. Thumbs up not surprisingly meant to rise. An OK sign means what you think it does, but a shaking OK sign implies something's wrong. The worst signal is a slash across the throat. It means you're out of air. The most prominent noise when you're underwater is your breathing. It's a good thing too. The steady rhythm of life. It reminds you to stay calm. You're a foreigner in this hostile world. Man may have conquered the land, but our dominion ends at the shore. It's healthy to keep that dynamic in your brain. We swam over the sun deck, looking for the stairwell that led into the bowels of the ship. There were still some chairs on the deck, but the currents had moved most of them, and they littered the seabed. If you stayed and looked down toward the engines, you'd occasionally see a black drop of oil seep out, its rainbow surface shimmering in the low light.
The stairwell came into view, and Will and Paul flipped on their handheld spotlights. The sudden burst of light sent the fish darting away. If they had the capability of thought beyond get food, it's hard not to imagine they'd see us the same way people talk about UFO abductions. Will reached the stairs first, shining his light into the abyss. It's haunting in the spotlight. A gauzy photo reel but with globs of disbelief smeared across the lens. If the area around the sun deck was like dusk, everything on the main deck and lower was midnight, black hole dark. We followed the beam of light down the narrow stairs. The wreckage shifted some of the furniture. The stairs remained mostly clear, but even a small obstruction can become a significant problem. When Will and I would go into the ballroom, it would be Paul's job to clear the path. We let him get to work and moved on. As we hit the landing for the main deck, something odd echoed off the surrounding walls. Music. There shouldn't be any noise down here, yet the muted sounds of someone playing a violin found our ears. It couldn't be a radio. Historically, water and electronics are bitter enemies, but our ears told us a different story. Someone or something down on the lower decks was playing a classical violin piece. I'm sure the fish loved it. Will gave me a thumbs down. I nodded and we started our descent down the stairs. With each step we glided past, the music grew louder. I'm not a fan of the genre, but it was a pretty tune. Somber, which made sense. We were trapped in a wreck 6 stories deep in the world's vast pool of tears. Somber was the only kind of tune for a place like this. When we got onto the lower deck, the music stopped. The sudden disappearance of the music and the rushing return of your breathing nearly made the ladder quit as well. Where had it gone? We were still trying to determine where it was coming from, for God's sake. It wasn't fair that we didn't even have time to discover that before it left. I glanced at Will, who shone his beam of light around the deck. Nothing was visible in here until the beam found it. His scans caught nothing but shadows and schools of small fish. No Jamaican crab conducting a sea creature band or anything incredible like that. Just the leftover remains of a slowly decaying wreck. Will nodded at the ballroom and swam toward it. 2 ornate, windowed French doors opened into an ample entertaining space. There were some tables and chairs in there, but from our vantage point, that's all that we could see through the glass. As we neared the doors, the music started again. Not the somber, wistful tune from earlier. This was aggressive, angry, a warning, a snake's rattle set to strings. I paused and gently touched Will's shoulder to stop him. I pointed at the room, made an okay sign, and started shaking. My streetwise gut told my book-smart brain that something in there didn't want us intruding. If I could have spoken with Will, I would have been able to plead my case better than just flapping my hands around. Since I couldn't and nothing looked out of place, Will disagreed. He nodded at the room and gave me an okay sign. He wanted to keep going. I shook my head no and gave a thumbs up. Let's go back topside and discuss. Will disagreed. He pointed at me and then raised his thumb before pointing at himself and pointing toward the room. The message was clear. He was going in, with or without me. I sighed, pointed at myself and then at the room. I'd go in with him. I'm not afraid to admit that I was scared, but I was more terrified of leaving a friend alone in the dark of a man-made cave 60 meters deep. He sensed I was apprehensive and reached out to pat my shoulder. I got you. Sometimes when you muck around in the remains of the dead, the slightest touch of humanity keeps you stable. The violin concert had gotten louder. I was sure even Paul could hear this from the main deck stairwell. The aggression of it was so pronounced that it even gave Will pause. The violins had reached a fever pitch that reminded me of the moment in Psycho when Norman Bates ripped away the shower curtain. Will opened the door to the ballroom, and the music stopped.
He flashed his light in there, but we didn't see anyone, just the stillness of a lifeless ship. Will pushed the door all the way open and floated into the room. I hesitantly followed behind him. Outside the beam of light, it was pitch black. Like can't see your hand in front of your face black. You could see where the light died out, just stopped cold. Speaking of temperature, that room was notably colder than the other sections of the boat. With a wetsuit on, you can block out the chill of the water, but that wasn't happening. It seeped into my bones, my soul. We'll pass the light toward the back corner of the ballroom, discovering 4 large barrels stacked in the corner. 2 had fallen over, but they were all sealed. The central standing barrel had the phrase, "Summer Song," stenciled across the front. That was the prize. From where we stood, it was in good condition. The client would be able to claim his multi-million-dollar prize without batting an eye. We floated over to them. The light beam bounced a bit as we kicked our way over, but the barrels stayed in the light the entire time. We were about 3 feet from them when I halted. I reached out and grabbed Will, nearly flipping him over. Between the 2 standing barrels was a pale face peeking out at us. I pointed, but Will didn't see it. I increased the urgency of my thrusting finger, but by the time that he located the spot that I had seen the face, it was gone. Behind us, a loud thump echoed throughout the room. The ballroom doors had closed. The sickening sound of a lock latching echoed through the ballroom. When you're this deep and something unusual happens, you can't panic. Despite how terrifying it might be, you can't afford to freak out. Taking huge breaths can cause lung damage or worse, deplete your air sooner than you wanted. If you panic and waste body energy, you're hurting your chances of having the kick you need to swim to safety. If you ascend too quickly, you get the bends, putting you and anybody you're diving with at risk. You cannot panic. But once you become trapped in a room darker than a Nazi's heart with a ghost hell-bent on terrifying you, not panicking requires the kind of concentration usually reserved for chess, grandmasters, and bomb squad members. I found my breathing quickened, and I did my best to center myself. I had been in hairy situations before, but this was rocketing up my list of bad times at record speed. Will turned the beam over to the door. As the beam hit the glass, a ghostly figure shuffled past the door. As fast as they were there, they disappeared. Will didn't hesitate. He swam back over to the ballroom door and tried to pull it open. It wouldn't budge. If the man was panicking, he didn't show it. I, however, was huffing air as if I'd never run out. My heart raced like a clipper ship, and every time I tried to relax, that haunted face appeared in my mind, pulling me back into panic's wake. I had been on hundreds of dives, but was acting like a scared honeymooner exploring a local reef. I swam over to Will and I grabbed the other door. He held up 3 fingers, and after the final one dropped, we both yanked. Again, no movement, not even an inch. I thought back to the blueprints but couldn't recall if there was another exit. The French doors were the only way in and out. Will looked into my eyes and patted my shoulder. He couldn't say anything, but I could hear his voice all the same. "Relax, kid, we've got this." It had the desired effect. My breathing slowed. Will shone the light into the other corners of the room, searching for another way out. I banged my fist against the doors. The thumps ricocheted through the boat. I hoped that Paul could hear it and come investigate. He wasn't supposed to leave his location, but Paul played fast and loose with the rules. I prayed he'd be willing to break them right now. Will explored the ballroom as I floated near the doors. I was alone in the dark with only my worst thoughts keeping me company. I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was watching us. The beam hit me and I turned to Will. He had found something near the barrels and waved me over. As he did, the invisible violin played one long, uninterrupted note. It was so loud, and the fiddler was absolutely inside this room. A chill ran through my body.
I wanted to get out of the water as soon as possible. My shoulders stiffened and the sensation that someone was behind me flooded into my brain. Before I could turn around to check, something grabbed my oxygen tank and yanked me down. I hit the floor and the violence ceased. My flailing made Will swim back to me. I pulled myself back up as he got there, but he could see the fear in my eyes. I tried to relay what happened, and thankfully he got the gist of it. He shone his light behind me, and we both spotted a loose wire floating like an eel snaking through the waves. I smiled and relief washed over me. I must have gotten my tank caught on it. Will lowered the light back to the floor and found a woman's high heel. The red bottom was there by design, but in my haze, I swear that it was bloody. And before we could speculate about the shoe, a loud thud echoed behind us, followed by an ear-splitting screech as the hull of the boat ground against the rocks and dragged against the ground. While the thud before the movement was loud, it came from this room. There was no way that caused the boat to shift. The force needed to shift a yacht as monumental. Unless the barrel was full of nitroglycerin, it wasn't the cause. One more theory came to mind and filled me with terror. What if the Allegro had landed in a more precarious spot than we first thought? The blackness of the trench came to me and I shuddered. Were we inching toward a crevice? Will's light found the source of the initial thud. A third barrel had fallen, sending the other two rolling into the wall. I couldn't tell you what had caused it to move, but it did. To say that I was concerned about what was shoving heavy-ass barrels around in the dark would be a wild understatement. Another thud near us, this time by the doors. Will spun and flashed his light. Another face greeted us. Paul. Good unsubordinate Paul. He had heard my knocking and came down to us. Through an elaborate game of charades, we conveyed the door was stuck. Paul grabbed the handle and yanked the door hard. The door opened easily, so much so that Paul nearly drifted off into the darkness from the force of his pull. We swam out and gathered Paul. Will gave him a thumbs up and there wasn't an argument. We started our ascent, leaving all of the madness behind us. We moved through the main deck without incident. As soon as we got to the sun deck though, I glanced down at my oxygen gauge. It was almost empty. It shouldn't have been. The tank was full when we left, and I know that we had more than enough to do the entire task without changing tanks. There had been no telltale bubbles from a leak. It was as if the air had just disappeared. I glanced up and barely saw the underside of the bottom feeder above us. It'd be a decent swim, but I believed I could do it with what I had left in my tank. If not, I could share with Will and Paul until we breached the top. It wasn't ideal, but the other option was death. I had to try. I tapped Will on his shoulder, made an okay sign near my tank and shook. Will nodded and relayed the information to Paul. We picked up our pace. When you're running low on breathable air, you don't really want to mess around, but our situation constrained us. Move too fast to get the bends. Move too slow, die from asphyxiation. A real damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. We broke through to the sun deck and kept going up, Will leading the way, followed by Paul and me trailing behind. I was just about to break free from the ship when my foot snagged on something. Initially thinking that it was a loose wire from the wreck, I tried to quick it away, but then I felt the grip tighten. I glanced down and my blood damn near froze. The ghostly white hand wrapped itself around my ankle. Panic finally found me. My scream was muffled and garbled through my regulator. I tried kicking away, but the hand wouldn't let go. I readjusted to get a better look, but when I saw it, my brain went fuzzy. There wasn't a body attached to the hand. I mashed my heel against the fingers. They let go, but my flipper dislodged and floated back down to the deck. I could ascend again, but my body wasn't kicking into gear. My struggle caught Will and Paul's attention and they came down to help me. They could see the fear in my eyes. And then my tank went empty. My speed, already limited, was now hindered by the lack of a flipper.
I turned my eyes skyward toward the underside of my salvation. Without a second thought, Will removed his regulator and gave it to me. I took a few breaths and I handed it back. We buddy breathed as we ascended to the bottom of the boat. My joints burned and the edges of my vision went black. The last thing I remember is seeing Cappy's waiting hands reaching for us. I woke up to the crew murmuring around me, caught the conversation in snippets. Will was confused. He didn't want to say that I had freaked out and that was the reason we were back up empty-handed, but he was tap dancing near that sentiment. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, my eyes fluttering open in the bright sunlight. "Jesus, kid, you alright?" Will asked. "What happened down there?" Cappy asked. "What happened to your tank?" "I don't know," I said, shielding my eyes from the sun. "It was full when we left. I double-checked it." "Yeah, I can back that up," Will said. "I checked beforehand, too. They were full. No indication of a leak either. We would have spotted it as soon as we got into the drink." "So how did it empty?" Maybe a broken gauge," Paul offered. "Shows fuller than it was." These are older tanks," Cappy said. "But what closed the door? What caused the boat to move?" "Currents," Will said, though he formed it more like a question. "A change in water pressure." "And then what caused the violin music?" I asked. Cappy turned to me confused. "Violin music?" "Well, you told him about the music, didn't you? And the person in the ballroom. You told him, right?" Will looked away. His face remained stoic, but his brain was trying to break the news to me that he had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't give him a chance. There was someone in the ballroom. A person." "What the hell?" Paul asked. "Yeah, they grabbed my leg as we left the sun deck," I said. "But it was just a hand." "Wait, a hand?" Cappy asked, not waiting for my response. He turned to Paul and Will. "You two see anything?" Uncomfortable silence followed. Paul finally broke it. "I was more concerned with him not dying." I didn't see anything either," Will said. "Sorry, kid." My head was already dizzy from the dive, but this kicked it into another gear. It felt dislodged from my body, floating above me. I finally found my voice. "I know what I saw, but come on, we all heard the music, right?" Will looked away again. "Will, come on, you know what you heard, we all did." "I didn't hear shit," Paul said. "Yeah, you weren't in the ballroom," I quickly countered. "I didn't hear anything either, kid." My stomach dropped. I shook my head, hoping an answer would come tumbling out, something to make them believe what had happened, but nothing emerged. Cappy let his heavy hand find my shoulder. "Son, is it possible that you were narking?" "No," I said, pushing his hand off my shoulder and standing. My balance was still off and so I stumbled, but I was so angry that I wasn't going to let that stumble stop me. "We heard violin music, I saw a person. Whatever's down there doesn't want us there." "Kid, you know how that sounds, right?" Will asked. Paul said what they were all thinking. "Sounds like you were narking, man." I ignored him. "Cappy, who played the violin? The man or his wife?" Cappy paused. "Well, the wife. But why would that matter?" A lightning shot through my nervous system. I was onto something. "What did the rich guy tell you, Cappy? Like, what exactly did he say?" "I told you. He was going through a divorce and wanted to hide his valuable items from his ex. Secured them, dropped the boat, and hired us to retrieve it." "Why?" "Well, if they were just divorcing, why wouldn't she have her violin? Who gives their soon-to-be ex-husband possession of a multi-million-dollar instrument? If they're divorced, she would have it. It wouldn't be here. I mean, outside of the rich guy, nobody knows we're out here, right?" "What are you driving at?" he said, lighting another cigarette. "He lied to you." Cappy laughed. "Why would he lie to me?
He hired me to save his valuable stuff. Why would I care? He did, but I don't think he got divorced. I think he killed his wife and put her body somewhere on the boat, and that's why he sank it. What are you saying? Will asked, confused. Are you saying the ship is haunted? Paul asked. I nodded. His murdered wife is pissed off and taking it out on anybody that tries to steal her things. Silence. 10 long seconds of it. The water lapping against the side of the boat and the creaking of the swaying winch were the only sounds in the air. Finally, after a few, Cappy laughed. Oh kid, come on now. I mean, it's a nice story, but you have no proof of... I saw her, I exploded. My anger was strengthening my weakened body. She touched me. We found a high heel down there. It was probably hers. Finding a high heel in the ballroom of a pleasure yacht is hardly proof that the owner killed his wife and hid the body on board, Will said. Hell, if we looked hard enough, we might find a whole stash of lady squirrel covers on board. Women attracted to yacht owners sleep with yacht owners. It's not rocket science, Paul added. Nobody believed me. Look, kid, Cappy started. No one's denying that the owner's a scumbag. Truthfully, you're probably right. But accusing the man of murder because you found a shoe, saying a sunken boat is haunted, can't stop a job based on these accusations. He paid half up front, and if we screw him over, he's exactly the kind of guy that'll come after us. If we don't finish this job, it could sink the company. I stood, my legs wobbly but resolve firm. If we go back in the water, something bad is gonna happen. Whatever is down there doesn't want us down there. Will and Cappy shared a look. The old man crossed to me, placed his hand on my shoulder, and shook his head. And Paul and Will are going back down to finish the job. You're staying topside with me. No discussion. The decision is final. I looked past Cappy to Will and Paul. Both of them avoided eye contact. And they weren't going to vocalize it, but they agreed with Cappy's actions. I was pissed. You go back down and you'll die in there. Kid, Cappy said, his voice hard. Dude, we'll be okay, Paul said, trying to calm me down. I'm not thrilled about this either, but this is the right call. Few hours and we'll be back in port hitting on drunk moms. Paul, don't go. Enough, Cappy said, his voice rising. Will, I pleaded. Listen to Cap, he said. He's forgotten more about the ocean than we'll ever learn. I wouldn't go in it if I weren't sure that I'd be fine. There's something... I began, but a stern mug from Cappy ended any objection. I was hurt and I didn't know how to express myself then or now that I think about it. I punched the side of the bottom feeder. The pain rippled from my knuckles up to my shoulder. I went below deck to escape everyone. An hour later, after tending to both my physical and mental wounds, I moved back up to the deck. Cappy was staring down at the water. He saw me and pretended to be unconcerned. The small pile of cigarette butts at his feet told me otherwise. Any word? No, he said. They should have hooked the first barrel up to the cable by now. Maybe the barrels are heavier than they thought. Those stairs were narrow too. Hard to navigate through them. He said. You don't believe that, do you? No, I said. He sighed and dropped another cigarette butt onto the pile. He turned his gaze to me and shook his head. You good enough to go in? I swallowed. Physically, outside of my throbbing hand, I was fine. Mentally, it was another thing altogether. But if Will and Paul needed my help, I'd have to go. Cappy nodded at me. Get your gear and go find out what's going on. If anything, his voice caught. I'd never seen Cappy this broken up. It cut through my cynicism and hit my soul. If anything bad happened, don't be a hero. Come up and we'll call the coasties. Company be damned.
and 10 minutes later, I splashed over the side of the boat and headed back down to the wreck. As soon as the Allegro came into view, my guts tensed. My breathing quickened, but I reined it back in. I was on a rescue mission this time. Lives were in the balance. I had to keep my wits about me. I reached the sun deck and the first stirrings of violin music started again. I swallowed, flipped on my flashlight, and made my way to the stairwell. With each foot I traveled, the violin music grew louder, more frantic. The tone flipped from somber to rage. When I finally got back down to the lower deck, my heart was racing. The violin bow was moving so fast across the strings that if we had been on dry land, it would have ignited. And that's when my eyes found something on the floor just outside the door. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that put an anchor in my stomach. 2 sets of scuba gear. My vision went blurry. I shook my head, hoping maybe I was narking and seeing something, but the gear was still there. The odds of them being alive down here were slim to none. If I pushed into that room, I'd find their bodies. A shrill shriek found my ears as the Allegro rocked back and forth again against the ocean floor. On the decks above me, loose items tipped over and landed with a dull thud that reverberated throughout the hull. The violin music stopped. As it did, something came pinging down the stairs. I spun around and flashed my light into the stairwell. A single red-bottomed high heel floated down. The unmistakable noise that had annoyed me for years found my ears. Paul's droning harmonica. I floated to the ballroom doors, peering through the glass. I nearly went blind as the entire room suddenly lit up in bright white light. I slammed my eyes shut. I could still see little white stars on the insides of my eyelids. The boat shifted again, metal grinding against the bedrock. I opened my eyes to a beautiful woman standing in the middle of the now illuminated ballroom, a violin tucked under her chin, a bow at the ready. She dragged it across the strings, but instead of violin tones, it emitted discordant, shrill harmonica notes. She locked eyes with me and grinned. The lights flickered off. When they came back on, she was gone. In her place were Will and Paul, stripped naked with their broken bodies in a heap and just like their gear had been. The lights flickered again and they were gone. The ballroom was empty now. I scanned the room for anyone, but I didn't see a soul. I noticed the barrels. The 4 had been ripped open and their contents scattered along the floor. Some photos and papers floated in the water. Any value gone. The lights flickered again. A 5th barrel stood alone in the middle of the room with the word toxic stenciled across it. The lid exploded off the top and landed near the ballroom doors, spinning like a coin on edge. That would have kept my attention if not for the woman rising like a cobra from the barrel. And gone was the beauty that had played the violin. In her place was the swollen, lumpy, broken body of somebody who had been in the water for weeks and crammed into a barrel with no concern other than that her body fit below the lid. And globs of jellied flesh broke from her face and hovered near her head. Saturn's rings, if they were made from discarded body parts. She smiled and her jaw fell off. She raised the Stradivarius up to her jawless head and played. As she moved her bloated body, more bits of her broke away. The music was reaching a fevered pitch. The boat groaned again as it shifted along the seafloor. More things on the decks above me fell over. It took me a second to realize the Allegro was listing now. Slightly, but it was tilting toward the trench. If it went under, I would join Will and Paul. As if I had summoned them, Paul's dead body floated past the window behind the ballroom doors. His throat had been ripped out. I could see into his stomach. He passed and it was Will's turn to horrify me. His throat was gone too. Unlike Paul, his eyes had remained open. As he floated by the window, his head jerked toward me and he mouthed the word, "Leave." That was enough to get me moving. I turned and kicked with all my might. As I hit the stairwell, the ship moved again. I wasn't sure how much time I had before this thing went rolling into the trench. An explosion erupted behind me and I turned in time to see the ballroom doors blow off their hinges. The disintegrating woman came out, playing her fiddle with reckless abandon, mucking up the water with her putrefying parts. She turned her attention toward me and followed me toward the stairwell. I focused all my energy on swimming up the stairs. I passed the main deck in a hurry, the violin directly behind me. My muscles burned and my lungs ached, but I kept pushing my body. I hit the sun deck and that's when the ground beneath the boat cracked away, and the ship tumbled deeper into the water. The suction pulled on me. I kicked my legs until my joints were molten lava. I put every last ounce of strength into breaking away from the boat's descent. With my legs and arms screaming in pain and my oxygen dipping into dangerous levels, I broke free from the orbit. I glanced back and watched the Allegra tip over the edge and drop into the trench. The woman's now flesh-free skull stared up at me as the boat fell away. She raised her ghostly hand and let go of the violin and the bow. They flew at me at a speed I didn't think possible outside of a torpedo. The bow crashed into my mask, cracking it. I slammed my eyes shut and did my best to clear out any of the glass. The strings had sliced my face like the edge of a saber. Blood rushed out. The cold water stung the exposed nerves of my sliced skin. The pressure of the depth pushed against my eyes and I couldn't open them. I would have to swim up blind. I started kicking as hard as I could, pumping my arms like a windmill, propelling my fragile body back to the surface, to air. Every joint felt loose as I swam, like I was coming apart at the seams. My limbs tingled and went numb, but I pushed forward. My whole body was itchy. The bends were coming for me. I was ascending faster than I should, but it couldn't be helped. I needed to get out of the water. Forever. Finally, mercifully, I broke the surface of the water. My energy was gone. Cappy sprang into gear and helped pull my nearly drowned carcass out of the drink. He had a million questions, and all I could barely repeat was, "It took them. Who?" The violin surfaced right near the boat. 10 million bucks floating an arm's length away, tantalizingly close. Cappy glanced at it, but I used the last bit of energy to shoot up my arms and grab him. "It's cursed. The whole thing was cursed." The violin sank back below the waves. My message finally popped to Cappy's bubble. The old man stumbled back against the gunwale. I can't read minds, but I know when a man realizes that he's made a decision that sent others to their graves. He clutched at his chest and fell against the deck with a sickening thud. He was dead. Harv finished his drink and placed the glass down to emphasize Cappy's fall. Both the bartender and I were spellbound. I had leaned so close that 2 legs of the bar stool were off the ground. "What happened after?" I asked. "Oh, called the coasties and told them that I needed help. Said we had gone out for a dive at a wreck and things went sideways. 'Cause of the bodies, there was an official investigation, but Cappy didn't keep records, and nobody ever came asking about the Allegro. I was cleared of any wrongdoing. Didn't feel that way, but that's what the official paperwork said. Last time I went into the ocean." "Jesus, Harv," the bartender said, pouring another drink for the man. "On the house." "Much obliged," he said. He glanced at me and smiled. He traced his scar with the tip of his finger. "And that, my friends, that is the weirdest goddamn thing I've ever seen out in the water." I paused before my brain coughed up a useless, "Are you okay?" Harv laughed. "No, kid, but ain't nothing that can be done about it." With one gulp, the man downed his drink and stood on unstable legs. I tried to help, but he waved me away. I didn't argue. That man had dealt with enough.
Normally, you play your hand until you bust, and then you get to leave the table. Cappy, Will, and Paul all did. But me, I got lucky. I went bust and got to watch all the other sad ones lose everything for 40 more years. He looked away and shook his head. That should have been me. My luck. He nodded at the bartender, clapped me on the shoulder, and kept walking until he left the bar altogether. I turned to the bartender. You think he was telling the truth? The bartender nodded to where Harv had been sitting. Next